Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Welcome to this episode of The Murder Part. Tonight we'll be looking at the Sea Wind murders. We'll get started with the introductions. Jeff?
My name is Jeff Pincin. I'm a licensed professional counselor in states of Delaware and Pennsylvania. And please stick around until the end where we respond to comments and questions. Leave a comment or question and we may respond in future episodes. If I had not become a counselor, what I really, really wanted to do is be a guy who paints and renames stolen boats so that someone can just get away. No big deal. Obviously, that's a bad idea. Didn't really think it through at first. So I had to fall back on counseling and yet another shattered, broken dream.
Yeah. Oh, tough break.
The road to counseling is just paved with shattered dreams.
It is. It is.
Pretty much for everybody. Yeah. Mike?
My name is Mike Smith, also a counselor in the state of Delaware. I focus in narrative therapy, geek therapy, and I'm a self-styled expert in all things geek. Had I not become a counselor at one time in my life, I wanted to be a guy who would provide a service, a very important service, reading people's mail to them over the radio when they're out to sea. Mm-hmm. And actually, I got an amateur radio license when I was 13 years old, and that's kind of what I wanted to do. Turns out, because it's amateur radio, you can't get paid for it. And, with the advent of email and Wi-Fi and things and like satellite phones, it just became, pointless. So I had to settle for being a counselor.
Oh, jeez. Sorry, Mike. The dreams of radio abound.
Dreams are broken.
So the Sea Wind murders is an interesting case because, first of all, it's very novel. You have these people going to a atoll, whatever we're going to call it an island, in a boat, planning on spending a year or two, depending on the source.
Right.
It was going to be at least 6 months, and they had provisions throughout the 2 years. Mm-hmm. And, with a case like this, they get murdered, right?
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
The murder part.
Yeah, they get murdered. And with a case like this one's one of those, it's a little older. It happened in the 70s, I believe.
1974.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's always this kind of concern, like, is there going to be a lot of information available about it? But as it turns out, one of the prosecutors involved in the Manson case, wrote a book about this case.
Right.
And, of course, the Manson case, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he wrote one about Charles Manson as well. I think that's what actually made him famous. So the book was kind of long.
I think he was kind of famous for prosecuting Manson.
Right. Yeah, no, it was a big case. Mm-hmm. We should cover Manson because there's all these theories that he really wasn't guilty, and I'm not sure he was. Obviously, he didn't commit the murders. It was a conspiracy thing.
Right.
But that would be a really interesting case. A lot of history with that one.
Obviously, a very popular one too. Well known.
Yeah, he was definitely a peculiar guy and a criminal, but I'm not totally sold on he ordered the killing. He probably did, but it would be an interesting case to cover.
Yeah.
But either way, same attorney wrote a book on this because he defended one of the people that allegedly committed the murders, and she was acquitted.
Right.
And a stunning verdict that, it ranks as, up there with O.J. Simpson and Casey Anthony is a incredible upset.
Yeah.
No one would have expected that if you're with somebody and other people die and the other person's convicted of murder, you wouldn't be also convicted of murder.
On a deserted island, nonetheless.
Where there's only 4 people on the whole island.
There's 4 people on the island. 2 of them end up dead. You're one of the survivors, and...
And you come back in their boat.
Yeah, with the other person who survived.
Yeah, with the person who later admitted that he was there for the deaths, although he had a different story where he said one killed the other. So very complex case. Let's hear a summary of what happened here.
Yeah, so the 2 that got murdered, Malcolm and Eleanor Graham. Now, Malcolm went by Mac. Eleanor went by, or some people called her Muff. I'm going to call her Eleanor. So Mac and Eleanor Graham. 1974, as we had said before, they went out to sail to the island. Name of the island, Palmyra Atoll or Atoll. Either way, it's a horseshoe-shaped or U-shaped island with a reef. And so they were planning to be out there for a year, 2 years maybe, and then after that, they were planning to settle down, go back to the States, settle down. So Palmyra Island. I don't know why I'm having trouble saying that. Palmyra.
Isn't there a Palmyra in New Jersey?
Pennsylvania as well, if not New Jersey. Yeah.
I think that from what I read, they were named after Palmyra in Syria.
Okay.
Like all of those things.
There you go.
I could be wrong, but that's one of the answers I saw when I was looking up, information on Palmyra.
Yeah, sure. So Palmyra is 1,200 miles south of Hawaii. So really very much in the middle of nowhere, right in the middle of the ocean. You have to be very intentional about going there. Now, it was a deserted island, is a deserted island. It used to be, I don't know if it was World War I or World War II. World War II.
Yeah.
It had military activity on it. It had since been abandoned. People went there just to visit, hang out, whatever. So they went on their sailboat. Now this is a well-equipped luxury 37.5 foot sailboat named the Sea Wind, and they were very accustomed to sailing, going on adventures, traveling, things like that. So they were well prepared for it, had enough provisions, were really prepared for that kind of life. So they expected nobody else to be on this island. They get there and they meet more than two people, but the two in question here. A guy that went by Buck Walter, his real name, he went by Roy Walker, real name Wesley Walker, but went by Buck Walker, and his girlfriend Stephanie Stearns. So they were already on the island, I think, for about a week before the other two got there. And we'll talk about the details, but Roy and, I'll call him Buck and Stephanie, just not very welcomed on the island. Their boat was kind of in shambles. They really didn't have any provisions, didn't really know what they were doing, really weren't equipped to survive on a deserted island. We'll talk about why they were there. But so, of course, there were some issues there, and of course, there was murders that happened. We'll talk about what Buck's story was versus Stephanie's story, but either way, Mac and Eleanor did not return from the island as they expected to, and there was a two different trials that ensued after that. One for the boat being stolen, which we'll talk about the details of that, but ultimately trials for the murder of Mac and Eleanor as well. So yeah, a very, very intricate thing, but also different. We've covered a story before about a boat or being on the ocean or on the sea, but these ones are interesting because, at least to me, this is not like, I've never lived on a boat. I've rarely even been on a boat. So this kind of lifestyle, this kind of way of living, is very different for me. And just to think of someone living on an island or living on their boat near an island for a year, maybe 2 years, is like, I can't even comprehend that, So a very different kind of thing for me. But yeah, that's the gist of it.
Yeah. So this story has kind of two different vectors that we can look at until they converge. The life of Mac. I keep wanting to say Mac the Knife.
That's a great song. Yeah. Great song.
I'll just call him Malcolm. Just
yeah. Yes.
And Malcolm Graham III and his wife. He marries her later in 61, and then of course we have Buck, who I think of Buck Rogers automatically, but it was Buck Dwayne Walker, and Stephanie K. Stearns, his girlfriend. So, starting with Malcolm, he was from Connecticut, went to college in Michigan. He worked at General Motors in the 50s. When he was 28, his uncle died and left him $100,000 in stocks and bonds. Not terribly a lot by today's standards in terms of like going out and living on it, but back then you could. In the 70s, that was a substantial amount of money. You could live for quite a while. So this really dramatically changed his life. He moved to San Diego, California. He met Eleanor Laverne Graham, and they married in Mexico in 61. He had already had a ketch, as you mentioned, 37.5-foot ketch, which was apparently a standout ship. Like everybody in the harbor. This had like 2 auxiliary motors. It had its own workshop in the forecastle. Had a acetylene torch and all these various tools.
And very well maintained. I think they said luxurious as well.
He restored it.
Yeah.
Everything.
That's right,
on it
because he was
new.
in business for restoring boats. And
It's like a
things
boat
that.
building and remodeling business.
He really took pride in the Seawind. Like he learned a lot about how to maintain and renovate that boat while he was doing it. And then for a while, he and Eleanor, they were living on the Seawind at port. Like they didn't have a house. They were just living on the boat. And he was helping with this business with renovating other people's boats from the marina. Mm-hmm. And he actually was making quite a bit of money there doing that because it's really expensive. You know what boat stands for, right?
Bust out
another 1,000. So it's a hole in the water you throw money into, is what they say. But he really enjoyed it. He really loved the boats. He really loved sailing. And like he really, really loved being out on the water. He and Eleanor had spent 6 years doing an around the world trip. Like they went everywhere on the Seawind.
Yeah, he had a partner that was on land, so he kind of worked from the boat.
Mm-hmm. So I just looked it up. $100,000 in just 1950. I don't know exactly what year it was, but $100,000 then would be equivalent to about 1.1 million today. So obviously a lot of money by any standards, but really puts it in perspective that, I could easily live off of 1.1 million, so $100,000 back then being the equivalent. I'm sure he was pretty well set.
Yeah. And they were stocks, so they could have earned more.
Yeah, right.
over the lifetime.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they were investments. So it wasn't just, here's $100,000 cash. Live off of that. It was stocks and bonds, and so they matured and they gained more, and could be used as capital and leverage to get credit.
Well, plus he did the boat thing.
Yeah,
right.
So, and I don't know what Eleanor's. There's not really much on her history available.
One thing said she did not come from money. Her family didn't have a lot. Which is probably why there's not a lot to be found about her family.
Yeah, we know that Stephanie Stern's family did come from money. We'll get to that. But, yeah, so we see everything was going pretty well. And there's reports that in June of 1974, Malcolm was 43 and Eleanor was 41. They wanted to settle down and have children. And they had one last voyage. I find it curious because these days, 41 to start a family, and keep in mind they have to finish the trip first, so it would really be 42 or 43. 41's a bit later than many people would feel comfortable with. I think it's considered like a high-risk situation, pregnancy. The cutoff, I think, is actually lower than that. It's like 35 is high-risk cutoff. Is that right? And that's these days with modern technology. Right. In 1974, if you went to a physician and said, I'm going to start a family at 43, probably get some type of pushback.
Yeah, I would imagine.
So I don't know if that's really what they were planning on doing. I think it was more just not sailing anymore because it's physically demanding.
Right.
And there's other things that I'm sure they wanted to do. But either way, this was the final voyage. So Malcolm planned it for 2 years and packed that boat full of supplies. My guess is he wanted the option to go a little longer.
Yeah. He seemed to love it.
Since we're out here.
Yeah, right.
Who's going to eat all these crackers and chips?
It really seemed like, at least from what I read, that Eleanor really had in her mind that she wanted to settle down. Now, maybe she did get pushback, or maybe not, but it really seemed like that was what it was in her mind. Like, I want to settle down. I want to have more of a typical, kind of life. And I know that there's a lot of opposition to those ideas of how late is too late, starting a family and things like that currently. So I wonder, I wasn't alive back then, and I don't know what it was like, going to a physician and, hey, I want to start a family at early 40s. But it just always seems to be the prevailing idea that, like, oh, you don't want to do that. The clock has run out, whatever they might say. But I wonder if they were to today, it almost seems like that would be kind of celebrated. Like, oh, you want to start a family in your early 40s? Good for you. Like, it's, So maybe that acceptance is I don't know. I mean, I assume it's a good thing. I've never looked into it, and but I assume that that's a good thing. Some kind of acceptance about doing things differently, not going along with what's always been expected or what's always been the assumed way of doing things, but instead, maybe that's not actually what it is. So I hope that that's a generally a good thing in modern day.
I would hope that people would be more accepting of it, especially since some of the science behind it is we get statistics about the likelihood of birth defects and the likelihood of things, and once you hit 35, all of those things double, right? But when the chance of birth defects is like 1%, it doubles to 2%. And it's not this huge, massive increase. I mean, statistically, double is huge.
Right.
But when we're looking at, percentage chances of something going wrong being so small, it's not that big a deal. Now, in the 1950s, medicine wasn't as bad, so it might have been a bigger deal. But Eleanor was also known to be very charitable with her time and with her effort, and just inviting people into her home, onto her boat or her ship. So it's entirely possible that what she really wanted was to adopt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She's 40. She might be like, I'm 41. I know I'm not going to have kids, but we can adopt some.
Sure.
Yeah, that was definitely a possibility. So this was their big trip. This was what they were going to remember forever, and this was going to close the chapter for Malcolm's boating, at least for extended trips.
Right.
All right. So kind of a big deal, and they picked the Palmyra Atoll, which is also referred to as Palmyra Island. And it's a northern line island. Typically, people only stop there when they're traveling from Hawaii to American Samoa. It's 1/3 the way down. If you're going south. In World War II, there was a base there. Apparently, a lot of equipment. They're just like, you know what? War's over. It's time to go home.
Yeah, they just left it.
Yeah, which is not terribly unusual in the Pacific as an American strategy. It's expensive to pull it out there,
back, right?
And it's expensive to pull it back.
Well, they took a lot of the expensive stuff with them, but they left like just the buildings that they directed.
Well, they left supplies, boats, in some areas, aviation parts and planes. It's something, was it going to be useful for the military on the mainland? If not, littering wasn't really considered a big offense back then. So you just left it. But it made kind of an interesting kind of touristy thing. You could check out the remains of the base, and it was, very isolated. It was an uninhabited island.
It was also used by the U.S. government in the late 60s for monitoring the nuclear tests in the South Pacific, especially the atmospheric impacts of nuclear testing. So, I mean, some of the buildings that were there were reused by the government when they were doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a really cool place. Like, it's one of the interesting things about the story is that there's this uninhabited island with all kinds of, I think it was Navy and Air Force represented, or Army Air Corps, I guess, back then in World War II. But there was, all kinds of supplies. You had, I picture like Gilligan's Island. I mean, there's a picture of it. You can, many pictures of it.
Right.
It's this big atoll. It has kind of a, like a lagoon, just like you saw in Gilligan's Island.
Yeah.
And I'm sure coconuts. We know that they ate coconuts regularly. And
on Gilligan's Island, yeah, they did.
And on the atoll.
Oh, yeah, and on the atoll, too. Well, the government, the military did a lot to reshape the islands because it was initially kind of a bunch of little islets. Like there was one big horseshoe-shaped one and a bunch of little ones. And the military was like, we just want to make it one thing. And he just kind of bulldozed, a bunch of dirt in to fill it up and make them all connected. They even built a landing strip for the airplanes, which actually still exists.
Right. You can see it on the Google Images map. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was going to say about leaving stuff on the island. We saw that with getting troops out of Middle East. I think that they even left big equipment there too, is my understanding. I don't know what exactly, but I remember hearing stories about that.
I think there was actually aircraft.
Was there?
But that was because it was done in a hurry.
Well, fair enough. I also saw that there was I don't know what country or area it was, but there was somewhere I saw that either scientists or the government or military left a bunch of supplies in some cold area, and it was taken over by polar bears. So here are these houses that have been abandoned for years.
They got like the helmets.
They might as well, right? They got guns. They're protecting their So you just have these pictures of these polar bears hanging out in these windows, just kind of looking out, like they just found a home and they inhabit it. And there's all these barrels there where they had brought oil and things to these areas, or gasoline to these areas, and they just inhabited these things too. And so I guess you're right. It must be a common thing, because they did mention how expensive it is to move those things back, and unnecessary, because like, well, we don't need this stuff. Why would we spend all the money to bring it back? Obviously, it's maybe not the best for the environment, depending on what the stuff is, but the polar bears like it.
I just
Say
have
something for that.
I just have this image of a polar bear sitting in a recliner with its feet up, smoking a pipe, and a
Holding an M1 Grand.
And he's just holding a pipe, reading a newspaper, and a little polar bear comes running in. It's like, they've come back. Like, crap. This is my house now. My house.
Drinking a soda or something. Maybe that's where they got
Maybe that's where they get the Cokes.
the Coke commercials. Yeah.
You gotta wrap the scarf around his neck before he goes outside to deal with the intruders to his home.
He's got to stay warm, right? They're just not equipped for the cold weather.
But Palmyra Island, I read one place that described it kind of like an Old West ghost town. Mm-hmm. And you're walking in and there's just like buildings that are just completely empty and just in amongst the stuff. It's really, it has a reputation for being a creepy island. Like even before World War II, there were tales of people being massacred on the island. Like nobody lived there, but there was at least 2 tales of people who died there. Like it was initially named Palmyra Island, the Palmyra Island or Palmyra Atoll by a Captain Swale, who ran his ship, the Palmyra, aground on the reefs and discovered it.
There you go.
And then that was in 1803, I think. And then in 1816, there was a Spanish ship called the Esperanza that stole a whole bunch of Peruvian treasure and headed out to the Pacific. They got attacked by pirates.
Naturally.
And all of the treasure and a bunch of the crew were moved onto the pirate ship. The Esperanza was sunk. And then that pirate ship got stuck in a storm and ran aground on Palmyra. And the 90 survivors of that ended up dying slowly over time, and some of them tried to escape. Supposedly, they buried the treasure on the island somewhere. Nobody's ever been able to look for it, but supposedly it's buried somewhere on the island. And the one survivor that managed to get away, like 4 of them managed to make a raft and get away, and 2 of them died before they got picked up. As they were getting picked up by a whaling ship heading back to San Francisco, one of them died kind of en route. The other one survived until he got to America and then was put in a hospital and died 30 days later. But he was the one, I think his name is like Hutchinson, John Hutchinson or something like that. And I could be wrong about the last name. But he was the one who recounted the tale about the treasure being on the island before he died. And then in the 1860s, there was a ship called the Angel that ran aground. And the next boat that came by found all of the crew members that had survived that had been murdered on the island, like slaughtered. So some ghost stories and some interesting things going on with the island well before 1974. And then the military took it over and all sorts of stuff with that.
And found the treasure.
They probably found the treasure. It's in a warehouse somewhere. There's crates stacked up to the ceiling.
There's a bunch of generals in a room just basking in this treasure. Yeah.
Well, Palmyra is just an interesting island.
It really is. Yeah, it's a curious choice. Like this is definitely a selection that Malcolm made because he wanted to be 100% alone. Like he wanted him and Eleanor to be alone.
Would you guys ever go to a deserted island? Like spend
not by choice
any amount of time on a deserted island?
Yeah, it seems like a bad idea even these days with like satellite phones and all that. I mean, the chance that they were taking, like you get in that boat and you turn the key and it just nothing happens. Obviously, it's a sailboat, but I mean, anything can happen. You could get disabled. The boat could take on water. Mm-hmm. Your radio could go out.
A hurricane could come. I mean, I don't know if that's prone to that area, but
storms happen.
Yeah, storms do happen. That's true.
Yeah, and another people could come and murder you. Right?
That could happen.
Yeah, it's a big risk.
Like I'm always reminded of the Castaway, Tom Hanks. When I'm talking about like deserted islands and especially satellite phones. It's like that's the thing I always think about when I watch that movie. Is like one of the big key points is like he was going through all of the packages from the plane that he was on. Like spoiler alert, Tom Hanks' character crashes into the ocean, washes up on an island. But he had been in a FedEx, like fake FedEx type of thing.
FedEx aircraft, yeah.
It was
Cargo plane.
It was a cargo plane carrying packages going from one place to another, and it crashes, and he washes ashore, and there's a bunch of these packages wash up on the shore, and he starts opening them, and he finds things that help him out, and then he finds one package, and he's just like has this thing of like this becomes his reason to leave. It's delivering this
angel
package.
wings on
Yeah,
it.
it's got the angel wings. He's like, this is my reason. He's not going to open it because he's going to make sure that he delivers this package. And the thing that always strikes me is like at the end he delivers. Spoiler alert. He delivers the package, and I'm like, I have this vision of what happens right after that. Like the person he delivers it to opens it up. It's a satellite phone. He's like, "Oh, this is my satellite phone." Like, wow, it even still has a charge.
It's still fully charged.
Like, holy crap! And I was like,
Yeah, or a flare gun, or what.
it's like that's the moment when his character just goes insane.
Well, if I ever end up on a deserted island, I want to make sure that I have an ice skate with me, just for the reason
For dental services.
For dental
Yeah.
services, right? That's the only thing.
And a volleyball.
And a volleyball.
And a volleyball.
Gotta have a
Those
volleyball
are the
best
only
friend.
things I want with me. I don't care if there's food. I don't care if there's a satellite phone. I just need those two things, and I'll be set. Apparently,
I mean, that's all you need, really.
right? That's yeah.
Yeah, that was actually, Castaway is one of those interesting movies because it's really only enjoyable the first time.
Yeah.
And many modern movies, especially high budget movies, they're designed with replayability in mind because of Star Wars, because that movie changed everything where people went back hundreds of times and watched it. So to do kind of a one-shot movie like that, big budget, although was it really big budget? I mean, the FedEx plane crash scene was expensive, but a lot of it was just Tom Hanks looking out the ocean,
Right.
growing a beard. Yeah.
Talking to
Talking about volleyball.
what was the volleyball's name?
Wilson.
Wilson. That's
Wilson.
right. Yeah. The brand
Was it Wilson volleyball?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that movie spawned so many jokes
Yeah.
in other
I mean, we're
media.
still talking about it. and
Saturday
it's-
Night Live has so many jokes with it, I'm sure. Like
when did that come out? It was mid 90s, early 90s.
the early 2000s? I don't remember. Hold on.
That sounds about right.
Because it used to be one of the only movies. We used to go to my great aunt's beach house, and it was one of the only movies that we had there because they didn't have cable. So every summer we went to the beach, and we knew we were going to watch Castaway. So
You know what's really funny?
somebody was replaying
You know
it.
what's really funny? We were actually both right, like, early 2000s or late 90s. Actually, 2000.
Really?
Came out
There
in
you go.
2000. So,
There you go.
Pretty good.
right there in the middle.
There was another movie. I don't know if it was an Iowa, but it had Leonardo. What's his name?
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Leonardo DiCaprio. And I don't know who else. But I think it was called The Beach or something like that, where I don't remember the whole story. So spoiler alert for anything that DiCaprio was in. But like there was this group of people that had gone off the grid on this. I don't know if it was an island or part of an island. And there was also AK-47 toting drug dealers that were there. And they're like, you can stay here, but don't tell anybody. And then DiCaprio and I think his girlfriend, they kind of messed things up when they, he kind of messes things up.
Yeah, it was called The Beach.
The Beach, yeah.
Also came out in 2000.
Yeah.
Leonardo DiCaprio and Tilda Swinton.
Yeah. It was actually not a bad movie. It was reasonably well, I think, scripted and acted. But yeah, that was kind of another like, we're off on our own, an island type situation. Like one of the guys got bit by like a shark or something, and they had to let him die because they didn't want to give away the secret. So he's like moaning and screaming as he dies, and they're just like trying to blot it out of their minds.
Jeez.
It got kind of dark there for a bit,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
It was a young Leonardo DiCaprio too. I mean, relative to like when he was in Titanic, and yeah, at least he looked young.
Young-ish.
Yeah, youngish. You're right.
I just saw a movie the other day with him in it. What was that movie we saw? Just like 1 or 2 days ago with DiCaprio doing something. Yeah. It was a recent movie.
Was it the one on Netflix, the Don't Look Up?
Don't Look Up. Yeah, that's what it was. Very good. It was a great movie.
Was it? I still haven't seen it. I think about it sometimes.
Yeah.
It was a great movie, though?
Yeah, I won't give away the ending because it's recent.
Yeah, sure, sure.
But
This is one I might actually see, by the way. You guys always say I won't give away the ending. I'm like, I don't care. I'm not going to watch it. I might actually watch this one, though.
yeah, it has DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence and
It's got Jonah Hill, too, doesn't it?
Jonah Hill.
Yeah, that one's got like everybody.
Yeah, it was
there's like
well
another
cast.
quite a few famous people. It's like very good cast.
Yeah.
I think Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep was in it
Oh, yeah.
as the president. Yeah, very good. It has kind of a message about science and about like
Sure.
social dynamics, but
Right.
like meta. There's a meta theme. But yeah, I really liked it. And
Well-
DiCaprio's a good actor.
Yeah.
Like did a good job.
Well, of course, now we can't say, you said meta theme, and now we can't say that the Facebook overarching company is named Meta.
Meta.
So now we can't even use that. They've taken that from us, too.
Interestingly, going back to this case, Leonardo DiCaprio, born in 1974, same year
As this was happening.
all of this was happening. Yeah.
This is a conspiracy.
Well,
I'm seeing too many connections here. I don't know.
it's like, wait. Leonardo DiCaprio does a movie about a boat and a beach, and this story is about a boat and a beach.
It's a conspiracy.
Conspiracy!
And there are murders that happen in these movies?
Whoa, Leonardo DiCaprio murdered these people?
That's what I heard. That is what I heard.
He traveled through time to do it, too. 'Cause, in August of... he wasn't born yet. In August of 74, he was born in November.
Oh, okay. So he didn't do anything. Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
We can
about
rule
that.
out one person.
There's still the time travel aspect of things. Like,
That's still a possibility.
He went to the set of Back to the Future, and the DeLorean was real time machine.
well, how else do you think they got it done on such a short time frame? Like they had to bring somebody else in. They had to bring in Michael J. Fox to replace. They had to shoot real quick. They just used the DeLorean, the time machine. Sometimes on a movie set, it's easier to build the real thing than to fake it.
That's true.
This is one of those times.
Like Titanic, another DiCaprio. They had a 90% scale model of that ship. $300 million movie. I'm sure they made all their money back and more.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
With a story where everyone knew the ending. Like 100% of your audience. No one was like, what? Wait, it's sinking? What?
I didn't know it. I want my money back.
Hey, hold on. That boat sinks?
I thought they said it was unsinkable.
They touted it as an unsinkable ship. How is it sinking? What? If you didn't know that before walking into the theater.
We should cover the Concordia someday.
Was that the sister ship or whatever it was? Wasn't there one
Concordia
that
is a modern vessel that some captain ran aground, I think, near Italy. And it flipped over and a bunch of people were killed.
Yeah.
And it was like a I don't know, it was hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to get the ship out because it was stuck. It's called...
Well, at least it didn't get stuck in the Suez Canal.
it could be worse.
Could be worse.
All right. So, so we're talking about June 1974. And, Malcolm and Eleanor, they get out to the island. They're expecting, we're going to be alone. They were not alone.
Nope.
There was a few people there, but there's only two that really of note that would kind of stay there for a while with them. And this would be Buck Walker and Stephanie Stearns, his girlfriend Stephanie Stearns. So kind of going back to their story, they got in some trouble. They were there just a week before. They arrived a little earlier in the Iola, which apparently was not seaworthy when it left.
To say the least.
Much less when it arrived. They had to be towed in the harbor by the other people who were there. And it was taking on water.
Well, when the Iola got there, it had been somebody tried, and we'll say Buck because it really was him. Buck tried to make it seaworthy, and he thought that the wooden frame and the wooden hull that it has isn't going to stand up, so he covered it in fiberglass. The problem is he put no insulation between them, and so every time the thing went over a wave, it was just wood smashing on fiberglass the entire time, just smashing into each other. So it was breaking every time it hit. a wave and crested a wave, and it just was not doing well. Their engine, the actual engine they had died a couple of days before they got there.
Yeah.
So they were just on wind power, so they couldn't even power into the lagoons. One of the reasons why they ended up running aground, because they couldn't motor around it.
Yeah, and this was a sloop, a 30-foot sloop, and I guess at one time it was probably a really nice boat, but not then.
Yeah.
So
I imagine that's of all the things that can go wrong. My boat is taking on water. I would think would be number one. I can't think of anything that would be worse than that, other than, I don't know, somebody died, I guess. But your boat taking on water, middle of the ocean, I can't really think of anything that would be worse than that.
It's not a good thing.
No, it's not a good prospect for what the outcome might be.
yeah, so Buck was kind of a strange guy. He had an armed robbery and passport fraud history, and apparently a bunch of other stuff. He had sold drugs, and it was alleged that Stephanie was involved. But they went to court, and he was convicted, and she was acquitted. Seems to become a pattern.
It seems to be a pattern.
So he was freed on bail, but he was facing, we learned later, 5 years. He would get sentenced to 5 years, but not this time. So he took marijuana seeds with him.
Well, when he ran off on bail. He went to hiding out in the lava flows on Hawaii, on the Big Island, and that's in a little secluded area was where he refitted the Iola, which he stole, and then fixed it. Because he had no idea what he was doing.
No.
When it came to the boats. And yeah, they grabbed a whole bunch of marijuana seeds because their idea was, we're going to go down there, we're going to grow a whole bunch of marijuana.
Yeah, I don't know if what they expected, like a bunch of people would pull up in a boat and be like, you know what, we really want bales of marijuana, like whatever comes in when you grow, like a lot. We want a lot of marijuana. Oh, you know what? I've been growing it.
Happens.
I just happen to have something in the bag.
You've come to the right island.
Buck, he had connections in that world, so I think that he was trying to make plans with them, like, hey, I'm gonna get a whole bunch, I'm gonna do this, so that's where I'll be in 6 months. Come down and I'll have a whole bunch of marijuana for you.
Instead, he had a bunch of well-fed bugs because they ate all the seeds before it grew into the plants.
Yeah. Also, the soil on Palmyra is not conducive to growing marijuana. But I guess Buck was like, it's dirt. Just put it in the dirt. It'll grow.
You get the impression that he was impulsive in so many different ways. I mean, he didn't really have a plan for this boat that they were on. He had to have known at some point before they left, this might not work out to my advantage. And he didn't, it sounds like anyway, he didn't really have much of a background in growing things or understanding how soil and climate and atmosphere impact that kind of stuff, or even how he was going to get the marijuana back anywhere. You know, like, is this boat going to is it going to last enough for me to bring it back? Or are people going to come down there? Or even one of the things they said was he would, because he apparently couldn't catch fish, he would shoot into the water to get fish. That, you've only got limited supplies, and now your plan is to use those bullets to shoot in the water, probably randomly, to get fish. It just seems like there was such little thought in every single thing he did. It was a wonder that he even made it this far.
I agree. There is so little thought in everything he did, and it makes me think he didn't even have that thought of, this might not work out for me.
You're probably right.
I think his thought was, I've got to get away from here or they're going to send me to jail, so this is the way we're going.
Or here's a money-making opportunity. Oh, marijuana seeds, great. Let's go to an island. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We'll get out there, get to the island. He was not the brightest bulb when it came to some of those things. I'm sure that he was very adept in some of the areas, especially in the criminal underworld where he thrived. Mm-hmm. Not entirely successfully all the time because he was arrested several times, but he had some success in navigating that kind of world. But he was out of his depth, so to speak, with sailing and living on a deserted island.
And it makes me wonder how he got away so many times, even after they got arrested for everything that happened on the island. I don't even know the specifics, but it seemed that he got out of jail, escaped from jail,
Escape, and
maybe more than
escape.
once, escaped from custody, even when they knew they were on the island, when they came back with the sea wind. Somehow he managed to escape them
He
then too.
escaped then too.
And he's just,
See, that's what he's good at. He's good at the escape part.
I guess maybe that's what it, maybe he's so good at not thinking. He just does. And it just seems to work out for him. Where the other people who are thinking, maybe like the second it takes him to think, that's the second he gets away. Because he's not thinking, so he just gets away.
He just goes, and then the people are chasing him. I was like, wait, what is he doing? And in that moment, he's just so far away now, they can't get there.
That must be it.
Wait, what?
Must be
I
it.
can't believe the audacity of this guy. What is he doing? But yeah, he manages to. That's the part he's good at, is the escaping part. He wasn't really good at the staying escaped part, but he was good at the escaping part.
And he was not a good criminal because he kept getting caught, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he did have a 22 caliber pistol, semi-automatic pistol, and that he did use it to fish. He used a chainsaw to cut down coconut trees too.
Which is just bizarre.
That is not how you get the
That's not how
coconuts.
you get the coconuts. Interesting fact about Palmyra and the coconuts. It's actually discovered that Palmyra, the coconut trees that grow on Palmyra, actually produce the largest coconuts anywhere in the world.
Wow.
They're the biggest and most triangular coconuts. And so it's a great resource to have. You got these huge coconuts.
Yeah.
And a great resource to have, but Buck is going to cut down the coconut trees to get the coconuts.
Best coconuts in the world. He's cutting the trees.
Yeah, he's cutting the trees down. Just climb the tree, man, and get the coconuts in. Or shake the tree, and if they're really ripe, they might fall.
I don't understand why he had a chainsaw. I mean, did he think about that before coming? Like, maybe there'll be trees there. Or maybe he thought he had to cut down marijuana.
That's when where he
bushes or
thinks.
something?
That's when where I think he might have considered that. He's like, if there's a lot of trees on this island, I'm going to need to make
gotta
some
clear
room
some space,
for some farmland. So
But at the same time, he doesn't understand roots. Trees have root systems.
right, which is
And-
why he just brought a chainsaw.
But so if that's the case, that he was looking to clear some land, he wouldn't have any more trees, but he still wouldn't be able to dig.
Right.
Again, not thinking these things through.
I'm
Going
so
forward.
curious. I wonder if he was thinking, I should bring a chainsaw in case I need to cut my boat up to use part of the boat. Because he's not thinking about how to get back. He's just thinking, what am I going to do in this moment to get what I need? Chainsaw.
Or he's just thinking, chainsaw is a great all-around tool to have. Just put it on the boat. It's gas-powered, so we can use it out there as long as we have gas.
We'll just go to the gas station and just get more.
Just go to the gas station. I mean, why, you wouldn't bring an electric one. Where are you going to plug it in, Jeff?
Exactly.
He needs one of the. You ever see those hand crank flashlights? And you have the hand crank. Like, this is taking forever.
It's like, hold on. In 5 minutes, I'm going to be able to use this chainsaw.
That's it.
That's all we got. Maybe he thought there was a power station down there too. Like maybe the first day he spent looking for an outlet on the island. Like, where do I plug this thing in? Maybe that was his first step.
I hope that if I ever find myself on Palmyra Island, I actually have one of those outlet stickers. It just looks like a sticker. Just put it on a wall somewhere. It's one of the
Or
greatest,
on a coconut tree.
It's just one of the greatest gags to do at like an airport, like just down on a thing, just make it look like an outlet there, and just watch how many people try to plug in. I hope I have one of those so I can just slap it on a tree. So the next person who comes by sees that and goes, "What?"
Well, if the next person that walks by is a Buck Walker type person,
They'll
you're
try
going to
and
be like,
plug
this
in.
looks normal. On a tree,
Great,
yes.
Great. There's a power outlet. Click.
I think these days people would expect like a USB.
Right.
It's like, what? Electrical outlet? That's useless.
How old is this island?
You need to remodel this place.
It's like, man, where's the Wi-Fi?
Get the military back here. They need to do some work on this place.
Well, there may have been electrical outlets in the military base. Of course,
Yeah.
there's no active generators to.
Right,
But
right.
he may have been trying to plug in. Like, what? Because in every movie, when the guy goes into an old place like that, they flip the switch. It's like zzz.
Yeah.
And it comes up. In real life, there's no reason to believe that.
Wait, there's buried underneath that building. There's got to be like thousands of capacitors. They've just been holding that charge.
Maybe it's solar, even though that wasn't available in World War II.
I don't know. World War II solar energy. It's a surplus.
It's an experimental technology. Yeah, so Hawaii, the distance between Hawaii and Palmyra Island is 1,061 miles. Took them 3 weeks to make the trip. Should have taken 7 to 10 days. The boat was in such bad shape when they arrived, they couldn't even make it to Fanning Island, which was the resupply point if you're on Palmyra. It was 172 miles. Can't swim that. Definitely need a boat. So, you couldn't even get the basic supplies that he would need. He was stranded.
Yeah.
And everyone knew it. Malcolm and Eleanor knew it, and the other people that came on the island recognized it as well. This guy was in trouble.
Yeah, he's way out of his depth. It's another interesting fact about the Palmyra stuff and Fanning names and things. Fanning Island was actually named after Captain Fanning of the, I think it was the Betsy, I believe is the name the name of his ship. But he also is supposedly contested the first person to discover Palmyra. Like supposedly he had these premonition dreams. He woke up 3 times in the middle of the night and like had this premonition of a storm. So he told his crew to heave to, just stop the boat. We'll ride out the storm. Storm hits. They get up the next morning and they see like they're just off of a reef, which is Palmyra. And supposedly. There are others who contest that it wasn't Palmyra, that actually it was like 35 miles north of there. But it was still one of the big reefs associated with that atoll. But yeah, Fanning Island, named after him.
How about that?
Palmyra, named after the ship Palmyra that first ran aground.
That's one way to discover it.
Yeah, which was in 1802 was when Fanning supposedly discovered the island, and 1803 was when the Palmyra smashed into it. And named it.
It must have been kind of an exciting time when there was still so much unknown.
Yeah.
Now with satellites, I'm pretty sure there are no undiscovered islands.
I mean,
Uninhabited,
but there are new ones coming up sometimes.
That's true.
They probably detect it within like 20 seconds when an alarm goes
Wait,
off.
what's that? It's like, do you have chocolate on the... No, it's not. It's not anything. It's actually a thing coming up.
Radio to someone up in space, like, can you check the whatever reaches down there on that satellite? I think there's a little bit speck on it. I think it's picking up something. No, wait, it's a new island.
That's another. Oh, great, awesome. Who's going to name it?
Well, whoever runs into it first, I guess.
L73162. That's its name now. Catalog it.
So there was a special on this story. I think that's like Investigation Discovery.
But is it Deep Waters?
I think
Is
it
that
was.
the name of it?
Yeah. I want to watch the rest of those because there's a few of those that look really interesting.
Yeah.
Murder in the Deep.
Murder in the Deep, yeah.
One of the things that really irritates me about ID, though, is like they changed the names of the people often. I don't know if they did in this story. I don't think they did, but they do that often. And I feel like they also change other things they think are not important. Like I was doing an outline on it was the case of Sheila LaBar, and they referenced, if I'm not mistaken, they referenced like a truck that she got into, and it was a car. Not a big deal, but they're probably just like, oh, whatever, just change it to a truck. Like they're trying to keep things anonymous. So you don't know if they did that in this story. I don't think they did because I checked it with other sources.
Right.
But anyway, in the documentary, they did a good job portraying Buck as like this kind of unrefined, fish out of water, and all these kind of sophisticated yachtmen standing around like, who is this guy? He's like shooting the fish and everything. And they're like, how unsophisticated.
Right.
And he's just like eyeballing them. Like, say something.
I think there was only a few times in there that Buck actually said anything. Otherwise, it was just him kind of staring at people, looking around these like long dramatic shots.
Wasn't a tough acting gig.
No.
The chainsaw, he's just staring people down with the chainsaw.
It was, the emphasis was definitely put on dramatic scenes in that investigation discovery thing. It was, obviously, they don't really know what it was like. They don't have any video of it, of course. They don't, they have a few like actual accounts of what might have happened there. So they don't, of course, really know what it was like there. But it was very dramatic and kind of excessive. I felt like it was kind of excessive how dramatic it was, and just kind of long and played out in that show. So I kind of wanted things to, I don't know, just kind of move forward, not have as many of those just I'm going to stare at you for a while kind of scenes.
I watched an episode of the FBI Files that was on this case, which actually was really well done. They had a lot more information than the Deep Waters one, and they still had their like the dramatization acting of it, but they were a lot closer to like what you would expect to see in reality. A lot less of the dramatic stare downs.
Yeah. Well, what we believe happened, and we don't really know, because at this point we only have Buck's dead. I couldn't find any information on Stephanie K. Stearns.
I couldn't either.
I looked everywhere, online, which is everywhere these days, and there was not a single. I didn't find a single record except ones I already had checked, and there was no updates. Is she alive? She could be, with the age.
Right.
She dead? Nothing. No idea. I do know what happened to Buck Walker. He developed cancer in prison, and he was released early, and he died 3 years later. And he apparently wrote a book where he has a story we'll talk about, his whole alternate theory of the crime that he created, which is just outrageous.
One of the things that happened is completely in character for Buck. The first time that he and Mac met, Mac was being a nice guy. Is the 70s, so like
everyone smoked.
Everyone smoked. Everybody smoked, and Mac's a nice guy. Buck asks him as Roy says, "Hey, you got a cigarette? Can I bum a cigarette?" And Mac, of course, like he hands him the pack, and Roy just takes like half the pack, and puts him away. And like, I was a smoker for 15 years. I haven't had a cigarette in like 7 years. I'm so proud of myself for that.
As you should be.
Yeah, but I remember when I was a smoker, I didn't hand my pack to anyone, even close friends, if they said, "Hey, can I have one?" Because I didn't want them taking more than I wanted to. So if they say, "Hey, can I have a cigarette?" Like, here's one. You asked for one. There you go. Because I had that happen, and that's the biggest. It is the biggest, most uncouth thing you can do. And in 1974, when everybody smoked, that was just a slap in the face. That started their relationship with a slap in the face.
It was a violation of etiquette. And I think, when you look at kind of everybody on that island, except for Buck and Stephanie, would consider themselves elite. I mean, these are very wealthy people in the 70s.
Right.
Again, the yachtmen, call themselves yachtmen. And they consider themselves sophisticated, a lot of etiquette, refined. They were ultra offended that the Buck showed up on this island, especially in a boat where they had to help him. And with him being low on food, and being tired of eating coconuts and fish, they were worried about aggression. But they also had that code of the sea, that nautical maritime code where you have to help people because no one's going to come out if you don't help them.
Right.
So they felt kind of obligated, and I think they really resented him for putting them in that position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because, Buck and Stephanie did not bring supplies with them. Like they did, they thought that, hey, well, once we get there, we'll have all the stuff we can eat. There's going to be berries and 7-Eleven around the corner, and we'll just have everything.
And tons of marijuana.
Just like tons of marijuana. So, of course, if there's tons of marijuana, there's going to be tons of Funyuns around. Right. But we're going to have everything
they just
we
appear,
need.
Right? The Funyuns just appear.
Right. It's a magical connection. But they were convinced of that. Like, this was an impulsive decision. Like, Buck didn't put much thought into it. And so they didn't have a lot of supplies. And they were starting to mooch off of everyone else who was there, asking if they had food, asking if they had this, that, or the other, if they could have some things here or there. And like, they didn't ask initially Mac or Eleanor, even though Mac and Eleanor were hosting everyone else who was there. They were inviting them onto the Seawind to have like dinner, because that was part of part of what they did. And they're serving the food and supplies that they have, and like having glasses of champagne because they've got some bottles of champagne there, while Roy and Stephanie, she was really creative with her pseudonym. Roy and Stephanie were just kind of like trying to get by on coconuts and, fish that had gunshots in them.
Gunshot fish.
Gunshot fish.
And I think I'd read too that they took to selling their stuff to people that would come on the island, or at least come around to try to get food, or maybe even to try to trade for food or something like that. So really desperate. Yeah.
Yeah, they were in really bad shape, and I guess I found one source that said that I guess Buck had dogs with him.
Yeah.
And one of the pit bull bit Eleanor in July, so when they got there.
Eleanor was terrified of the dogs and of Roy.
Which is funny, right? Because Buck Rogers, interesting he chose that name. Buck Rogers would have been around in the mid-'70s.
Yeah.
So would have been very aware of it.
Yeah, so I wonder if he thought like Buck Rogers, Roy Rogers. I don't know. So the Grahams invited Buck and Stephanie on board Sea Wind. You can only imagine what that was like, right? Like they were probably like, this is what they look like inside.
This is what a boat's supposed to look like inside? Wait,
guys have
they
food?
have food, right? Buck, why don't we have any food?
Did you think about this at all, Buck?
Supposedly, like Stephanie was like, she was in awe of this and was just like, holy crap. And like every step, Roy just got madder and madder.
You picture Malcolm like, I don't know why, it gives me the Gilligan's Island connection. I picture him like Thurston Howell III, right? Because he's Malcolm Graham III.
Yeah,
so he's got like a cigarette or cigar. He's like money burning. You all right there, Roy? Roy's just like thinking, I'm going to kill this guy.
Roy, my boy.
I had to start a fire. All I had was this amount of cash.
It's like, oh, we needed to keep warm. Yeah, throw a couple of hundreds on there.
Stacks? Yep. Add them on.
Stacks of money. Keep it going. And that's probably what Roy was seeing in his mind's eye, looking at all of this.
You pictures like diamonds everywhere, and just there was a lot of reasons for him to get increasingly envious, and he was hungry, or at least tired of eating fish and coconuts.
Right.
So as visitors came and went, Malcolm told them he had a .357 Magnum revolver, and that would take care of Buck if need be.
Yeah,
they cautioned him to leave.
Yeah, that was some of his other friends and other visitors to the island were like, as they were getting ready to leave, they were like, "Well, I don't think you should stay here. Those people are crazy."
Not the least of which was Eleanor saying
that hippie couple.
The hippie couple.
They call them hippie couple. Yeah. They call them the hippie couple.
Not the least of which Eleanor saying, "I really want to leave. I don't want to be here with these. Really didn't like them. They didn't seem to get along with each other." But Mac, of course, the gun, and I think he was also a black belt in karate, so felt like he could take care of himself. But of course, it's not just I can be ready to defend myself, but there's obviously a lot of situations that could happen, even something happening to Eleanor that you just can't control. Right? There's so many situations that could happen, things that could put you in danger that you just cannot totally prepare for.
Yeah. And around that time that people were leaving was Eleanor wrote a letter to her mother and sent it with Bernard and Evelyn Leonard. They're actually important to the story. Bernard and Evelyn Leonard had become really close friends with Eleanor and Mac during their time on Palmyra. And Eleanor was like, "Can you mail this letter for me when you get back to Hawaii?" And they were glad to do it. But they were some of the people saying, like, you shouldn't stay here. You should go. Like, leave before something happens.
Yeah, for whatever reason, Malcolm just would not cut his vacation short. Again, maybe because it was the last one. I'm kind of surprised that, clearly Malcolm was intelligent and he considered himself sophisticated. Why didn't he go down to Buck and be like, you know what, I have some like radar or whatever he would know, or Buck would know. I got like a computer in there and it says a big storm is coming and it's going to wipe out the whole island. So we got to go. It'll be here in like 10 minutes. Just something tried to...
It's like, I've got some weather sensing equipment on the boat. You got to get out of here.
If he had perfect wisdom, he would have said, oh, I just got a call from the FBI. They're coming here. I don't know why. What's going on with that? But something about Hawaii and drugs. Who knows? Breaking up the transmission. You only see the tail of the stern of Iola.
just on its way back. He's like actively patching it as he's sailing.
It just goes down. Like as he's rowing it, like I just picture him rowing. I don't even have oars, but he's like rowing it, 30-foot boat, and it's just like going in the water.
I picture him has his feet like and he's on the back of the boat, has his feet in, and he's just
It's a
paddling,
paddleboard.
just paddling for dear life to get out of there.
And when he gets back, if he left at that point, got back to Hawaii, he's kind of like Captain Jack Sparrow when you first see him in Pirates of the Caribbean. He's just standing on top of the mast as the ship's underwater.
And what did they do in there? They flip it upside down and just walk underneath the water.
Oh, that
That
was one of them. Yeah. But like when he's first introduced, he's literally standing on top of the mainsail of the boat, and the rest of the boat, like everything, like 2 feet below the sail, is underwater, and it just cruises right in, and he steps off onto the dock.
I mean, that's a good point, though. If Mac had allowed his whatever it was that was keeping him there, if he had allowed like his sensibility to take over, he could have maybe easily done something to help encourage Buck to leave. Maybe the FBI thing, he didn't necessarily know that he had a criminal history, but maybe the storm thing, or I don't know. You have to imagine that he could have reasoned with him, or could have figured it out in his mind, like, how can I make this more advantageous to me staying on the island and Buck not staying on the island? But I don't know. I don't know what it would have taken.
I do kind of think that Buck kind of, or that Mac kind of had this is my island.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be run off of my island. Mm-hmm. Like, I came here for a reason. This is an uninhabited place. I'm here. Mm-hmm. And I obviously know how to survive on this island way better than they do. So this is my island. Let them go. Let them get out of here.
Yeah.
And maybe he figured they would leave or starve to death.
I think he figured when it's just us, I can protect our supplies, and they won't have anything, so they'll leave. Mm-hmm. And that turned out real well for him.
Right.
Yeah, he was better armed. 3v7 against 22, but it's all about, do you know it's coming? They have to sleep. Yeah. And, it's not much in the way of alarm systems and light sources. One thing that occurs to me that they could have done, I don't know much about the world of ships, but maybe kind of move to an area where Buck could not have reached him. Like it was in the Northern Line Islands, maybe another island nearby. Yeah. And just stay there and kind of then come back in the day. I don't know.
I mean, if they know the Iola's not really seaworthy, they just go a couple miles out, drop anchor, and stay there when it's time to sleep, mm-hmm. and then come back in at any given point. But regardless of any of that, Mac decided to stay, mm-hmm. and by mid-August, the Sea Wind and the Iola were the only boats left on Palmyra.
Yes,
and it's important to note that Mac had been staying in contact with a friend who was in Hawaii.
Kurt Shoemaker. And they would in contact by radio. And they would check in, I think it was at least once a week, if not several times. And Kurt never missed a check.
No, never missed a check. Kurt would get their mail for them and read it to them over the radio. God, lucky.
Could have been you.
Lucky. SOP.
You could have been reading bills like,
right?
Boy, we get that.
The bill.
Sorry, tell them we're going to be out for a little bit.
Your taxes have come in. It's not good. Sorry.
The tax in the whole boat. Stay out there.
Your property taxes have come in. But on August 27th, Mac radioed and talked to Kurt, and in the middle of that conversation, Mac was just like, "We're done. Like I gotta go. They're coming over." Said something about they're bringing a cake with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he said, "I guess they've made a truce." And then he saw the cake, and then Kurt heard a woman's voice, and then he heard laughter. Some sources have it as August 28th, but Kurt definitely remembered the conversation mm-hmm. where something was happening, and Malcolm's like, "I better find out what's happening." That was the last thing he said.
A week later,
It was a coconut and fish cake.
yeah, coconut and fish.
I was about to say, how
the thing
are they
that
making
got
a
me.
cake out there?
Yeah, that's the thing that got me. Like, where did they get the cake? Like
They
couldn't,
probably took it from them.
like, they couldn't have just run down to the local bakery. There wasn't a local bakery.
Maybe there was a leftover cake in the World War II building, the military buildings.
You know, probably World War II surplus cake.
Happy birthday, Captain.
And he just, they left the island. He didn't get the cake. They had a glass jar over it the whole time.
Happy birthday, blank. Like, you fill in.
They just had him sitting around. I'm sure of it. I'm sure that was very important during World War II to have
they were
cakes.
they were canned. You just take the key and open
It pops
up.
right out.
Yeah.
Perfect form. Yeah.
Yeah. That's absolutely where they got the cake. I'm convinced of it now. Convinced of it now.
Has like a little PT boat on it.
But a week after that, Kurt radioed to try and make contact, and there was no contact, no response from the Seawind.
Yeah, he was immediately alarmed and had a friend of his fly over the island. And they said nothing was there. No vessel of any type. Yeah. So we presume at this point that we'll find out some things later, but Buck and perhaps Stephanie, again, she was acquitted, so not guilty. At least Buck was involved in a homicide. So well, we can talk about the theories in a moment, but we know that they took Seawind and repainted it.
Yeah.
And made some other changes to it.
It was initially blue. And,
Lavender.
They painted it lavender. They took the nameplate off and renamed it.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a market for that, is what you're saying.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there's a market, but it's not the best market. And
But there's a market. So there's a chance.
I'm sure, but I don't think that Buck would have had much money to pay for that service.
Oh, you're right, because criminals,
Right. 'Cause
yeah, they're trying to make the money or something. All right. Well, I'll keep working at it.
it's not like Grand Theft Auto where there's a whole bunch of people with a whole ton of money who just like, oh, I need to make this car different colors. The cops will get off me. And you just, you're good.
I'll keep working at it.
Yeah. If we lived in that world, you would have been a success.
I'll just live in a video game world. I think that sounds reasonable.
Well, GTA 6 is coming out, so
Yeah,
a few years.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
It was October '74 when the Seawind was next spotted, lavender and with a different name.
Yeah.
It was actually spotted by Bernard Leonard. So, I was one of the last people to see Mac and Eleanor.
Right. It was obvious it was the same vessel.
Yeah.
And he had a vessel that was really capable of going pretty much anywhere.
Yeah.
You picked Hawaii, where the vessel had left from.
Yeah. And
No thought.
and where he was wanted.
And apparently where Mac and Eleanor had friends that would hang out.
But I guess
But
he
she
figured,
might not have known.
I guess he figured nobody's going to be able to tell it's the same boat. Their boat was blue. This one's lavender. Like nobody's going to be able to see.
They don't
It's
even look the
Like,
same.
they don't look the same at all. Except they
Except
really
they
did.
really did.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I mean, their boat had 2 masts. This one has 2 masts. Their boat was a certain length. This boat's a certain length. I think if he had just
totally
thought
different.
about
They're
it,
totally different. Totally different.
I think if he had just thought about it, just for a little bit, he might. But no, not him.
But Bernard contacted Coast Guard, who contacted FBI, and they stationed somebody to watch the boat, and they saw Roy and Stephanie. They called it in, and Coast Guard went down. But somebody, as they were puttering in on their little dinghy, somebody said, "Hey, the Coast Guard was here looking for you."
Yeah, I think they had the Zodiac from Seawind, which they kind of messed up their story and said it was at the island, but they actually had it with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's this big like chase scene.
Yeah.
Right?
Roy jumps in the water. Buck just jumps in the water and swims for it. And you know what? The people chasing were just like dumbfounded. And they lost him.
Yeah. Stephanie also fled.
She did.
They found her behind us.
Behind a potted plant in a
stairwell.
hotel.
Yeah.
In a hotel stairwell. She didn't hide very well. If she'd swam for it, she would have gotten away. But,
Assuming she could swim.
well, it's because they were Coast Guard chasing her, and apparently those Coast Guard guys couldn't swim.
They were
I don't
totally
know why.
perplexed by what happened. Well, you can jump in the water? What?
Apparently, just those guys, because I have all respect for the Coast Guard. But it was like Roy just got away. Like he's just like gone. Like, but he did drop his wallet.
Right. He left his wallet as a courtesy.
Yeah. Dropped
One
his
of those
wallet.
nice things that criminals do.
So they had his picture, and they knew he was Roy Allen. And one of the FBI agents showed it to a DEA agent who was like, "Oh, that's Buck Walker. We've been looking for him. He's wanted for stuff."
Yeah, they eventually did get both of them, Stephanie right away, and then later on Buck. And they were charged only, well, a bunch of things, but all related to stealing Seawind.
I love how they caught Buck too. Like 2 uniformed officers who were carrying his photograph around and going over different businesses, showing off. They sat down in a restaurant, showed the waitress, and she's like, "Yeah, he's right over there." So they just walked right over and said, "Hey, you're under arrest." And he was like, "Okay." Like, no incident. But it was like, it's like that's how they caught him. He went into the restaurant to have a beer, and the waitress had just sent him over to the bar. And the cops were like, "You seen this guy?" "Yeah,
As a matter of fact,
he's right over there."
you're never going to believe this. He's right there.
Like that never happens in the history of investing. Like, that never happens.
I
We
mean,
don't hear about it anyway.
but consider this is Buck Walker we're talking about, infamous for not thinking things through. Let me hang out in restaurants. Let me,
I know the cops are looking for me, but I could just go for a beer right now.
really what I need right now. I was swimming a whole lot, really need a beer.
So when these guys faced the charges, right, they had some things to say to the authorities. Apparently they did synchronize their stories, so they must have talked as they were stealing the boat. And they said, Malcolm and Eleanor invited him over for dinner. And they walked in the boat, and there was no one there. The next day they went looking for him near the lagoon, and they found the Zodiac, which is, I guess, a style or brand of boat.
It's a specific brand of
Yeah.
inflatable boat.
Yeah, and it was overturned, which I guess the authorities were saying it really wouldn't sit in the water that way. And it was supposed to be right in the water, not on the beach, I guess. But either way, they said it was overturned, and they're like, you know what? They must be gone. Let's, oh boy, the vandals are going to get the boat. I guess Mischief Night was coming up or something. I'm like, oh no. Oh, well, it was October, right? So there you go.
They were thinking about it.
They were thinking about how Mischief Night's coming up. We better protect it from all of the kids on the island.
Trick-or-treating, yeah.
They're very,
Before the trick-or-treating.
very altruistic.
Yeah.
Trying to be concerned about other people's belongings.
Well, they looked around the neighborhood, and they're like, there's just so many dangers here that could affect the boat.
One of the things that's interesting about the dinner thing was Stephanie said that they went over, they didn't find anybody there, and they decided to wait just because Buck was like, well, maybe they're out fishing. So they decided to wait, and then it turned evening, turned to night, and they just slept on the boat. They just stayed there on the Seawind. And the next morning, when they still hadn't seen anything, they went for a walk on the beach. And that's when they supposedly found the Zodiac overturned. Not the Zodiac killer, the Zodiac boat overturned on the beach.
Yeah, so then they have this kind of weird story that, of course, was contradicted by evidence that they produced. But they said that they hooked up Iola, and they're pulling it out. They're going to pull it home. I guess the vandals would also get it. And on this reef, it broke loose and it sunk. And they're like, all right, well, what are you
It's
gonna
the
do?
reef that did it.
Yeah, the reef sank it.
What are you going to do? Right? So we'll just take it on to Hawaii and repaint it. And
Yeah.
they said a swordfish attacked them on the way
Well, it's ours now.
and punctured the hull. And that's why they repainted the boat.
Well, of course, if a swordfish punctures the hull of the boat, you have to repaint the whole thing.
Right, because he's going to be looking for that boat.
You just patch it. You just put a small patch on where the swordfish hits. You got to paint the whole thing.
And Buck is a master at fixing boats any way possible. I mean, the Iola made it down there, and he was the master around these repairs. So
I am curious as to where he got the lavender paint, though.
it's a good question.
The one detail that's never been solved in this whole case. Where did Buck get the lavender paint?
The swordfish.
Swordfish must have had it.
The neighborhood on that island really went downhill quick. The swordfish are out there attacking boats, and what they probably tried to do. The swordfish probably tried to vandalize the boat with the lavender paint, Buck, being very smart, overpowered the swordfish, got the paint,
Shot him with a 22.
shot him, but he still attacked the boat. But Buck got the paint. It all worked out.
But there was already paint on the boat, so instead of trying to just wash it off, he just painted the whole thing.
Exactly. That's exactly
Gotcha.
what happened.
That's-
Right.
See, that makes sense, I guess. In a certain universe, I guess it would make sense.
So he had a good story, except he forgot one thing. He took a picture of Iola standing on Seawind in the open seas. FBI got a hold of that. Like, wait a second. You said it sunk.
On the reef.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said it sunk on the reef. Yeah, and the picture had Stephanie standing on Seawind and Iola right there,
It wasn't good.
and just out in the middle of the sea, and it's like, really?
The only thing that would have made that better is if like there was a dead body like in the picture, or like the torch that they had down there like out somewhere. Like really just to make their story not line up. Some kind of detail that like, oh, how did I miss this? The Buck would have. How did I miss this?
But the other thing, like the FBI ended up flying out to the island to look for stuff, and they found the Iola's hatch cover just on the beach.
You would never leave behind.
You'd never leave that behind because that hatch being open will take on water real quick. And as we've already established, you don't want to be on a boat that's taking on water.
Especially a boat that's already taking on water.
Right.
You don't want even more water.
Because it's got a terrible broken hull. So the FBI was like, they were scuttling it. They left the hatch cover because they were intending on having the Iola sink.
Yeah.
I think it probably took longer than Buck expected.
He probably thought it would go right down.
It's like, it'll go right down. And a couple days later, he's like, no, it's still here. And after that, it went down.
What they didn't have was any word on where the Grahams were.
Yeah.
And they felt pretty comfortable with their case. They figured, can't make them appear, and it's a big ocean. So he was convicted. Buck was convicted 10 years. Stephanie was convicted 2 years, out in 7 months.
Yeah. Prosecutors did want to press charges for the murder of the Grahams, but they didn't have bodies. And they figured, if they're acquitted because we don't have a body,
Jeopardy's attached.
and then jeopardy's attached, and the bodies, wash up somewhere,
Yeah.
we won't be able to charge them.
It was the smart play, especially with a 10-year sentence. It was smart just to say, who knows, maybe somebody will stumble on the island and find an aluminum box with bones in it. And that's what happened.
Yeah, that's what happened. Yeah, 6 years later. 7 years later? It was 1981.
81, South African couple
7, yeah.
visiting the atoll, and we're walking along the beach, and a woman saw human skull and some bones, and then some wire, and then an aluminum box from an Air Force or Army Air Corps boat.
And a gold watch. A gold woman's watch, which actually was the thing that tipped her to who it might be, because she had heard about what had happened to the Grahams, that they had gone missing.
Which makes sense considering where they were.
Yeah. She'd heard about what happened at the disappearance of the Grahams. She saw this gold watch and was like, that must be her. So she immediately called into the Coast Guard and said, hey, I found this. And the Coast Guard called the FBI. Because it being a territory of the United States, FBI has jurisdiction on criminal investigations out on the water.
Right, it was a federal case.
So it was a federal case.
Yeah, so the skull was in the best condition of all the bones. It had pretty clear puncture wound, probably a bullet wound, right next to the eye, between the eye and the nose. And it had burn marks on it, as if it had been exposed to an acetylene torch, like the one in the forecastle.
And I think it looked like it had been dismembered, or there was evidence that the body had perhaps been dismembered.
Like with a chainsaw.
Like with a chainsaw, perhaps.
Yeah. But they also found that there was a lot of evidence of what they call coffin burn or coffin rub, as the skull had planar sanding, essentially. Like it had been sanded down in certain areas. It only happens if the body is sitting on a hard surface. It doesn't happen if it's buried in sand or dirt. So they were going to say this thing had to have been like in a container, and the aluminum box that's right there is the likely container.
Yeah, with the broken wire, as if it had been wrapped around it. Yeah, so they were charged with murder. They had to, Stephanie was easy to find. Dwayne had escaped. He was living in Arizona.
He'd been
Buck, I guess.
He'd been in prison in Washington, and the FBI was like, "Hey, let's go pick him up in Washington because we're gonna try him for this." And they went up there, and the prison was like, "Oh no, he escaped like 2 years ago." And they're like, "What?
Oh, Buck Walker."
Oh, you said Buck Walker."
We've been calling him Roy. I see what happened.
I thought you said Steve Walker, and just like, no, Steve Walker's over there. Buck Walker, yeah, he escaped with a couple of other guys.
I think they got on a boat. I don't know. It's unclear to me. Maybe they found a boat somewhere and
Painted it lavender, and that was it. Right. Yeah, so I'm guessing Buck had a public defender, right? Considering he was literally a fugitive when he was arrested. I doubt he had amassed a fortune.
He didn't grow any marijuana, so.
No, so they decided
he was actually trafficking marijuana out of Mexico during the escape with a couple of other guys who had been in the same prison.
He was very career oriented.
Yeah, that's true.
So the federal government, their plan was to try Buck first, and they figured this was like a 2-foot putt. Right? You can't miss this. Mm-hmm. And then Stephanie would be very easy to convict. Really. They had no worries. This was the clearest cut case of conspiracy to commit murder.
It's like this was so easy. They thought it was such an easy thing that they didn't even charge Walker with any of the drug trafficking from the 2 years he spent doing that after he escaped from prison. They didn't even throw the escape on there. They were just like, yeah, murder. We got the murder charges. Mm-hmm. That'll be fine. And the thing is, they only tried him for the murder of Eleanor.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever been charged with the murder of Mac.
It seems obvious that he was killed. I'm kind of surprised they didn't go for it. I wonder if it makes the jury think, well, maybe they wonder if he was the killer, like if Malcolm was the killer, because his body's not found, so what if he did it? Mm-hmm. Which is what Buck would later say. He didn't testify in his own behalf during his trial, but later he wrote a book, apparently. Yeah. I think they kind of took a chance. I see it as a package deal. I mean, you have the bones of one, the other one's missing. It's pretty obvious.
It seems likely. Yeah. But they didn't want to put all their eggs in one basket just in case,
his body showed up.
In case he was acquitted of this one, and then Mac's body shows up, they want to be able to charge him.
And it's life.
That one, so.
They probably figure it's life either way.
Yeah.
Right? But of course, prosecutors are also kind of pushed. Like they're motivated by the justice angle, like Malcolm didn't get justice. But maybe they figured he would be satisfied with his wife getting justice. Mm-hmm. So,
and interesting, at that trial, one of the guys that he escaped with testified against him at the trial. He said that while they were in prison and several times afterwards, he had talked about the hassle he had with the couple on the island. And he mentioned that Walker had mentioned to him forcing the man to walk the plank, walk off the end of the boat.
Crying.
And mentioned that the man was defecating all over himself and that he was sniveling while he walked the plank and crying. And then Ingman testified that Walker said he had killed the man.
Yeah. Yeah, so he was convicted. I don't think that was a tough case, really. I mean, he had the boat. He was already convicted of stealing the boat and some other related charges. He had a long criminal history. He had a firearm on the island. He had access to a weapon. So then the real surprise comes. So, Stephanie's family's wealthy. They hire Victor. What was his?
Bugliosi?
It's a Bugliosi, something like that. Or Vincent. Maybe it's Vincent. Look it up. I think it's Vincent Bugliosi, right? I believe he died some time ago. If I'm not mistaken. He died in 2015, at the age of 80. So, Vincent T. Bugliosi Jr. Prosecutor on the Manson case, he wrote Helter Skelter in 1974. And then and The Sea Will Tell in 1991, which is about the Grahams. Actually, it's really about his defense of Stephanie Stearns. Right. So, probably one of the best attorneys that Stephanie could have secured.
Right.
Very competent and a master of preparation, which is really what it takes to be a good, just about anything, right? If you prepare.
And he stated he believed 100% in her innocence.
It's impossible to me, it's impossible to believe. But yeah,
But a good enough lawyer, maybe that's what it takes. Like, not only saying that, perhaps, but believing it too. And maybe not fully believing it, but believing it enough to really put on that persona that no matter what somebody says, I'm going to show with conviction that I believe that my client is innocent.
What I find interesting is in his book, he referred to Stephanie as Jennifer Jenkins. You defended her. She was acquitted. You can go ahead and you can put the name in there. Like, you should be proud.
Everybody knows about this.
Right. Like,
Everybody knows.
I don't understand the name changing. It doesn't, like, if he was, well, first of all, I don't think he was worried about liability. Right. And if you change the name, it doesn't really help with the liability anyway. Everyone can figure out who it is.
Right.
Just say who it is.
Is it possible that that Stephanie wanted the name changed?
Could be.
Maybe. I mean, maybe she doesn't even have any say in anything because it's
public record.
right. Yeah. I don't know.
It's possible that she changed her name.
Could be.
That's what it was afterwards. And that's why we can't find anything that happened. Stephanie Stearns.
Yeah, I have no idea what happened to her, where she is.
We don't know about that particular part.
We do know she was acquitted. And as I mentioned, a shocking, like jaw-dropping verdict that I have to believe even Vincent didn't expect.
Yeah.
But the essence of his case, he goes on a lot of talking in the book, but the essence of his case was that Buck made efforts to hide the body of Eleanor and presumably of Graham, or of Malcolm Graham, because he was never found. And why would you try to hide the body on the island if you had a conspirator that was in it with you? You dump the bodies at sea. So it was really about, his argument was really that Buck should have been a competent criminal, and only a competent criminal would have done this. A competent criminal would have put the body at the sea, like dumped the body at the sea. So he was arguing that Buck knew what he was doing. So already his arguments.
Well, we already see that
flawed.
we know that it's flawed, but his argument definitely was like Stephanie didn't know about what happened. She wasn't there because she had been staying on the Iola. She'd been sleeping on the Iola, and Buck had taken up residence in a makeshift tent on the island. So they weren't staying together. So the thing was like, oh, Buck went and murdered them, and then tried to hide their bodies from her.
Right. That was the argument.
Because he needed to hide the bodies from her because and that her story of they were just missing is the absolute truth from her perspective.
Right.
Because she had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
And
that was her defense.
Yeah. She testified to that too on the stand.
Yeah, that was her defense. That, I guess essentially that something like Buck comes back one day. Oh, guess what? We got this boat. Don't people own that boat? Oh, who knows? Who knows what happened? It's no one's around.
I don't know. Their Zodiac was turned over on the beach.
Can't find him anywhere.
And that's the thing. He probably did that. Like, he probably overturned the Zodiac himself so that she would find it.
So here's the argument, right? She was acquitted. Now, acquitted is not necessarily the same thing as innocent. But then you start thinking, what if she didn't do it? Is that possible? And for me, I think it's possible, but I feel as though she was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
I think reasonable doubt was eliminated when you take the stolen boat back to Hawaii and you run from the authorities. Why not just say, hey, look, I did some bad things, but I'm not involved in this murder.
Right.
This is my first chance, to talk to you.
Well, she was running from the theft of the boat. She was also running because Roy ran. Like, she did what she wasn't good at it. She didn't get far. Roy got away for 10 days. She got away for 5 minutes. Like, it's it kind of leans into that she didn't have anything to do with it. She'd been with Roy for long enough that he's on the run. She's looking over her shoulder too, just out of habit. And when Roy runs and takes off from the authorities, she's taken off too.
And she had no criminal record.
No.
Right.
Coming into because she had been acquitted for the drug charges. Yeah, so who knows? And so, yeah, there's doubt, right? You have two people on a boat. Maybe one killed the couple and the other one didn't. Now, here's my argument. And, there's some, I think gender stereotypes play a role in how people think about this argument. What if she was tried first? Would anybody believe that Buck was like, oh, I don't know, she killed him, and I didn't know what was going on?
Mm-hmm. No. I don't think.
I don't know. Like, who knows? I mean, anyone can operate a gun, right?
Yeah.
It was a .22. It was very easy to manage.
Yeah.
Don't need much hand strength.
It was all the stuff that happened afterwards, especially with the dismembering of the body and the putting it in an aluminum.
But she could have done that. Right? What I mean,
technically, she potentially could have, but once that box was put out to sea, like it had spent time in the water, and it is possible that you could use a chainsaw. Anybody could use a chainsaw to dismember somebody and then take piece by piece, put them places. But they were, once it was all in the box, that would have been a heavier box.
Okay, then how about this argument? Buck was an accessory after the fact, but he had nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with the murder.
I could potentially accept that. He was on a moonlit stroll somewhere, and
he was shooting fish.
She wanted.
He could have had a gun.
She went in to go. She had the gun, but she was for protection against them, and went in to go get some Cristal or something, get some champagne. They came back, found her, so she just shot him. But then she would have had to do all of the had to enlist him in the after the effects. But again, he has the criminal record. He has the bigger record, and I think that's one of the reasons they tried him first.
Yeah.
But yeah, there could be a little bit of sexism involved in that. I mean, if I don't think you think you're right. I don't think that if Buck had been tried second, he would have been acquitted by using the same strategy of she did it.
Right.
Yeah. I don't think any attorney could have got him off those charges.
But especially, he probably had a public defender.
Well, yeah, I think he did. Yeah, in '85 he did.
I also do think that if she had been tried first, she would have been convicted, because they wouldn't have been able to say Buck is guilty of it. Like, he was found guilty in court. Like, but that's what they were able to say. Like, Buck was convicted. Like, he's already in prison for this murder.
We know who the killer is.
We know who the killer is.
Yeah.
But if he hadn't been convicted, they wouldn't have been able to bring that in and say, like, yeah, he was convicted. I mean, like, he's still awaiting trial, so we don't know whether he did it or not. And
I think the question this speaks to is, can you do so much after the fact that you that you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt? Like, is there a point where that becomes evidence of a prior act? You steal the boat, you paint the boat, you run from the authorities. At some point, you're in a criminal conspiracy.
Yeah.
It makes sense that you were also cooperating. Wasn't a conspiracy before, but you're cooperating with him when he was out on bond and a fugitive. It wasn't a crime for her, but it was still cooperating with a...
Right.
It could have been. I mean, in theory, could have been. They should have never charged with that. So you're doing something wrong in the beginning. You're doing something wrong when you pull into the marina in Hawaii. Makes sense you were doing something wrong in the middle,
between,
right? Like,
right.
You were in a conspiracy the whole time. But amazingly, she walked.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about, like, how would Buck have been able to do all this to both of them and get them without her knowing? But they had days, potentially more than a week, by themselves on the island. Nobody else was there before they would have set sail. Because Lord knows it probably could have taken them from August until October to get back with the way the sailing skills that they had. But if she was staying pretty close to the Iola and just staying there and not venturing very far, and she'd developed a pattern of that, he could have, killed them at night and then just kind of hauled their bodies into the jungle, waited, and then just kept moving into some of the where the military buildings were, and had all the privacy in the world to do whatever he wanted. Dismembering them with the chainsaw, trying to burn burn them with gasoline and the acetylene torch in the boxes, which were taken from some of the supplies. The empty aluminum boxes came from some of the military supplies on one of the, derelict and forgotten rescue boats that was there. So he used the aluminum box, dismembered her, put her body in, poured gasoline on top, and used the acetylene torch to get it started and get it running. There was some forensic evidence that the inside of that chest had been subjected to heats of about 1,100 degrees, which means an accelerant had to be used.
Right.
But then it was sealed up.
I'm wondering here, when you're talking about the boats and the boxes, the military was there after World War II as well. So it might have been an Air Force and not an Army Air Corps.
Okay.
Because the sources said it was an Air Force. I'm like, Air Force didn't exist in World War II.
Yeah,
but I wonder if it was after an Air Force rescue boat had 4 boxes. Right?
The Air Force rescue boat had 4 aluminum boxes, and 2 of them were missing.
Right.
One of them
Was recovered.
So we can account for 3 of those missing boxes, and one of them's still out there. And we still have a missing person.
Yeah, it seems pretty clear. That was Malcolm's final resting place.
Right.
And at this point, obviously, it's pretty unlikely to be recovered. Although, maybe the Air Force really makes quality boxes. They probably overpay for them, right? Isn't it the one that had the scandal? Didn't the Air Force have the scandal with the $1,500 hammer or whatever?
NASA.
Oh, was that NASA?
That was NASA. Okay. Nobody pays $1,500 for a hammer. Well, you do if you have to put it through a whole bunch of testing to make sure that it still functions in a zero-gravity environment.
Yeah, so one other theory that occurs to me is, what if Stephanie was an accessory after the fact and not involved? That's possible too. Yeah. Like, he came to her afterward and said, I need your help stealing the boat and all that. And I think many people would just say, well, if if you're going to cooperate that much, then you deserve to go to prison.
Yeah, right. And we didn't even mention what Buck's story was the love triangle.
He had a few, right? First he played chess and he won. He won.
Oh, yeah, that was his explanation for how he had this yacht.
Right.
Was that he won it from a multimillionaire in a chess tournament, like a chess game. Like they played chess, and he won the boat.
I would love to see a cross-examination of Buck testifying about that chess game. So I took the horsey thingy, and I jumped over the castle thingy.
No, I think all you have to do is just allow him to play a game of chess in the court hearing.
Against like a kindergartner.
King me!
And all I picture is just the judge, gavel down, case closed, everybody go home.
Yeah, but Mac was actually a wonderful chess player. Like he was an avid chess player and really good at the game. And I don't imagine that Buck played very often, but it's possible.
It's possible.
There are a lot of people that play chess that you might never expect, and are very good at it, even though they're not good at anything else in their lives. But yeah, and like speed chess is a thing that happens quite often and can be very competitive. And that's something an impulsive person might be able to really shine on. So maybe he was good at it, but doubtful. And winning the boat off him, just
winning a chess game, period, and then winning the boat.
Yeah, winning a chess, and it would have to have been more than one chess game because they wouldn't have just bet the boat on. Like, nobody who owns a boat like that is just going to be like, you know what? You've never played chess against me before, but I'm putting my boat on it.
This is like, I picture this like Fast and Furious, those movies where they like would race for the pink slips for the car. That's what I picture in this. So I picture
Vin Diesel.
This very dramatic scene, chessboard, and in the background you have both the Iola and the Sea Wind, and like they're just standing there. Right, they're just sitting there in the water. Iola, of course, is sinking slowly, and Sea Wind is just in its glory sitting there. And these guys, sweat just pouring from their brow, playing this high-stakes chess game. And of course, Buck, he's cool as anything. He knows he's going to win, right? That's what I picture. And then, of course, just the ultimate checkmate. and Buck just, stands up, mic drop, and he just walks over to his boat. He won fair and square. That's what I picture. I imagine that's how it went.
I think that's how it went in Buck's mind.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe Vin Diesel does walk out at that moment and says something real cheesy.
Family.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many times you get checkmated. It's all about family.
What did he say in there too? Like it's not how fast the car is, but who drives it, or something along those lines.
Makes no sense. All those movies, I like them, but as far as like automotive and engineering and driving skills, I don't know what they're talking about.
I love them as a series. They are ridiculous, and they get more ridiculous as they go along. Like every movie has to top the previous one with how ridiculous it can do an action sequence, and how ridiculous it can make some ridiculous car thing,
Right?
like some Franken car nonsense. Like one of them had like car flipper cars, like had a like it was
right.
cage thing. Like a couch.
It was like from the Road Warrior, right?
Right, it was like right after Road Warrior. It just rose right underneath the hood and just poof and starts flipping cars. It's like, what?
Yeah. And if you're going to use, first of all, they're always using cars to rob things, which doesn't make sense. And they use expensive, like classic cars. It's like, why would you need a car like that? Wouldn't you use like an old car? Yeah, it's like James Bond.
Was it 5 where they actually stole the vault out of a building,
right?
with cars
with two vehicles,
right?
Yeah,
right.
pulling. But yeah, I mean,
it's so ridiculous.
It's like James Bond combined with Wild West movies, combined with some Star Trek in there, like with the technology they have is unbelievable. And probably a few other genres crammed into one movie. It's like
and then there was the one that was essentially Karate Kid, the Fast and the Furious version.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Yep. Is it Tokyo Drift?
Yeah, Tokyo Drift.
Right.
Fast and the Furious Karate Kid. I mean Tokyo Drift.
Yeah. Yeah, they get the high school drama. They squeeze everything into the.
And the fact that they're still going, like I think they're planning to come out with another one.
Yeah, they have 9. They're going to do another one. Oh, and then there's the spin-off, the Fast and Furious Hobbs and Shaw.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't even have any of the other main characters in it. It's just spun off. It's a great franchise. I love the action. I just suspend disbelief on it. Just like, this is what it is. This is a Fast and Furious movie. It is what it is. Mm-hmm. It's great to look at the wonderful cars.
Great cars. Yeah.
And the action sequences can be really nice. But I'm not in it for the intelligence level.
It's almost like, very much like Grand Theft Auto.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Probably has the same draw. I mean, see a bunch of nice cars, trucks, and women is a big part in that movie as well, just like it is in Grand Theft Auto. So it's, probably pretty similar crowd, I would imagine.
But mostly, it's about family.
You're right. You're right. So there was that story.
Right, the chess.
There's the chess story, yeah.
And there's another story.
And then, of course, the love triangle.
It's as unlikely as the chess.
I don't know. I think it's more unlikely than the chess.
Probably right. For some reason, Eleanor and Buck got together. There was two
It was
parts.
probably when he won the chess game. She was so impressed.
Right.
Somehow,
Nobody's ever beat him before in chess.
now he's got our sailboat. Oh, I must be attracted to him now. Yeah, so Buck and Eleanor, and of course Mac found out about it, killed Eleanor. Buck got away because he's so smart and
The bullets were coming.
able.
I mean, he is good at getting away. He's good
That's
at escaping.
He did a Matrix, right?
He was so ready for those bullets to come. He just even knew what was and so he got away, and I don't remember what happened to Mac in that.
Presumably
story.
he was distraught, I guess, I assume, and either ran off or ended his life or something.
Yeah. Okay.
I couldn't find anything. I didn't really look that hard, but on his book, I don't know if it was a real book, but he claimed he wrote some type of
Pamphlet.
Something he handed out to anybody that would
I didn't
take
look
it.
too hard into that one either, because like his
I was scared I would find it.
and then you would have to read it. 'Cause, yeah.
Yeah. I'll just take a quick look at it now. I'm curious. Is a book by Dwayne.
Palmyra, The True Story of an Island Tragedy by Wesley Walker. It is.
Oh, that's right. He went by a different name.
It is available on Amazon. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, I think.
It is how many pages long? 6? 7?
Well, the chess sequence alone is
Oh,
Are you
chess
pages?
long.
Are you sitting down? 722.
that's longer
Is
than
that one
Vincent's
word
book.
per page?
It must be. Now, you know what this says? This says it was published November 4th, 2015. So maybe this is just a subsequent release of it or something. But it says 722 pages. Yeah.
$28.
Maybe he's got a lot of theories. Wow. A lot of other theories in there.
Or maybe he talks about a lot of other things. Like that chess game probably is a good 150, 200 pages.
It's got to be.
Well, if you
Every move has to be described.
if you look into the comments here on Amazon for this book, I think they're pretty much in sync with what we're talking about.
What we're getting.
The book needs some serious reformatting to get some logical order into the storyline, and reduced by 50%. They're being generous, probably. Most readers will give up after the first 30 pages.
I would say that most readers probably gave up before even ordering it.
I didn't even look for it.
Well, the first sentence of this description: romance, tragedy, or media soap opera. I would imagine most readers stop after that and move on to the next thing.
Oof. Yeah, it's pretty bad. One of the commenters says, "I knew Buck Walker in Hawaii." I was like, "Okay."
I see. There's another book that shows up called Final Argument. Mm-hmm. An examination into the murder of Mac and Muff Graham on Palmyra Island, subsequent trial of Stephanie Stearns. I wasn't even aware of this one. Did you read this one?
I didn't look that one up. Okay. I mean, I saw that it was available, but I didn't get involved with that one.
Yeah. So there's a lot out there, or at least some out there, about this case from different perspectives, of course.
Okay, I want to point out something real quick to people who might actually look this book up on Amazon and look at the comments just to see what we're talking about. I want to say there's a comment on here from 2018 that just says good and it's 5 stars. It's written by a person named Mike Smith. That is not me. To be clear about that right now, not me. I didn't even know this book existed until recently, so
I figured you were the only Mike Smith. It's a rare name.
Apparently, I just want to make it clear out there. There are more than one Mike Smith. I actually graduated with 2 others. There were 3 of us in my graduating class. Yeah.
I mean, you felt the need to say that to make that very clear.
I did.
I'm thinking at this point that you actually did leave that.
I just happened to look down. I was like, oh god, there's somebody's going to look at this and be like, Mike Smith, isn't he the guy? Like the guy? No, it wasn't me. Did not do it. Glad I got this book cheap.
I mean, there's a comment from a guy who claims that he was cellmate with Buck. One of the things that I love about book review or any kind of review, obviously anybody can submit a review. They don't have to have bought the thing. They don't have to have read it, anything like that. And I love the reviews. You're not really sure if it's real or not. Mm-hmm. And especially the ones that are definitely not real or just satirical kind of things. But the ones you're not really sure if it's real or not. I was given a copy of this book by Buck himself. Before he left Victorville Federal Prison, he was my cellmate. I am dying to know if that's true. And he only gave it 4 stars. So, like,
impressive.
Did he like Buck that much, or was it like, oh, Buck's a 5-star guy, but the book's only 4-star? I'm very curious about this, and I wish I could know.
I love this review. Having read Buglioso's book on this case, I came into this with an open mind. Much of the book is taken up with what can only be described as puerile porn, perhaps reflected being written in prison. Walker labels to establish he is the smartest person in the room, but also irresistible to every female he has contact with. If he had spent more time on checking facts rather than telling the reader about his sexual prowess, it would have shortened the book somewhat. but may have provided some credibility.
Well, you have nothing but time in prison, right?
Well, that's true. Yeah. Oh, gosh.
So Buck Walker died of a stroke, but if I'm not mistaken, it was secondary to terminal cancer. And so he was released. It was life in prison. He was never supposed to get out. And I guess he couldn't escape this time. So they released him, but he held on for 3 years and made all these claims about being innocent.
He was released. He was on parole, if I'm not mistaken, right? Right. Okay.
Yeah, he wasn't free and clear, but he was
Right.
out in the community.
Right.
And yeah. So, one of those cases that I think really kind of highlights how we believe things, like what evidence we look for. No case has it all, right? I mean, there's always going to be doubt. This one has more doubt, I think, but not a reasonable doubt. And I think that it really kind of speaks to like something, a criminal conspiracy. What you do with that person forms a pattern, and that pattern can be used to convict you. So if you're stealing boats and everything, now again, Stephanie was acquitted, so she's not guilty, and that's how the case ends.
There's a pattern of that too. Like she was acquitted of the drug charges while she was with him, and I guess she was convicted of the boat theft, but she only served 7 months for that.
Well, this was a case it was a federal case that involved a lot of other complexities, but it reminds me kind of like felony murder. It's weird to see this not guilty verdict, and then see some 17-year-old who was driving a car away from a convenience store that was being robbed, and his friend was the person who did it, and he's down for felony murder and life in prison without parole, something like that. It's like, what if he really just was in the car, and the guy's like, I'm going to get like a Slurpee. Is that what 7-Eleven says? A Slurpee?
Yeah.
I'm going to get a Slurpee, and he comes back and he's got blood spatter on him, and he's holding like a smoking 9mm, and he's like, drive. And he's like, well, he's got a gun. I better drive. Or he's my friend, and I better drive.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that with this not guilty verdict, you could certainly make a case for the idea that felony murder is ridiculous.
Depending on what lawyer you have.
That kind of thing actually does happen quite often. I do have a friend of mine who had a similar thing happen to what you described. He was 18 years old, fell asleep in the back seat of a car with a couple of his friends. They went in and robbed a liquor store, came out, drove off, and they all got caught. He was charged as being an accessory. Because the prosecutors were like, there's no way you didn't hear them talking about going to rob this place. But he was passed out in the back seat. But he was charged with it, and ended up. I think he got probation. He took a plea agreement for probation, but it still sticks with him.
Yeah. Dog the bounty hunter was convicted of first-degree murder. But it was in Texas, right? And they have, at least back then, they had a wide range. It was like 5 to 99 years, and he got 5 years because he really wasn't that involved, but he was there when somebody else. He was like in the car when somebody else murdered a man with a shotgun, using a shotgun, right? So, yeah, I don't know if he had a criminal state of mind or not, but with this case, with this not guilty verdict, I feel like this gives hope to people who were in a conspiracy at one time, but not in another, and are trying to say, I was down for the robbery, or I was down for like the theft, say, because robbery is, that would be felony murder, but down for like a misdemeanor theft, and then they did this,
Right.
But you could also argue in this case that stealing a boat was a felony.
Yeah.
So, but it could have happened later.
But yeah, the theft could have. Stephanie's involvement in taking the boat could have been completely independent of the murder of.
And it was the only game in town to get off the island.
Right. The Iola definitely wasn't getting off the island. If she wanted to get off the island, she needed that, or she needed to start making a boat out of coconuts.
Yeah. I think you could make an argument for like she was a hostage. I don't think you can make a great argument for it, but there is,
Right.
If reasonable doubt is here, I think she's close. There's doubt. It didn't rise to reasonable, but it's there.
Yeah. The jury that heard her case felt that it did, and I think that it might be her testimony that kind of put it over.
And Vincent's preparation, I think.
And his preparation, the way the whole thing was able to be handled. Like just looking at the facts, the reasonable might be here, but like hearing her speak it kind of puts it over.
Yeah. Well, I think more juries need to be cautious, and if they felt there was reasonable doubt, then I respect that. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of juries out there just go with the prosecution story without even thinking about it. But Vincent made them think.
Yeah. I think very often juries sit and look at the defendant's table and go, well, he wouldn't be sitting there if he didn't do it. And that bias plays into them listening and just buying the prosecution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So any final thoughts about Seawin? This is a kind of case that is particularly attractive because it's got so many dimensions.
I don't know that I really do. I mean, yeah, I have nothing right now. You got anything, Mike?
Yeah. I think that my final thought on it is don't go to deserted islands. I mean, what's one? That I think that might be like rule 1B. Right? Rule number 1, of course, don't go to prison. Rule 1B, don't go to deserted islands. Kind of a similar thing, I guess. But this case also strikes me very much as a case of machismo gone overboard.
Yeah, right.
Like Mac was definitely a manly man. Mm-hmm. He was trying to embody this adventurer, this well-to-do. Like he was the guy who could have been James Bond, right? Like he was an expert in martial arts, he's an expert in chess. He's a great sailor and very charismatic individual. Mm-hmm. But he was the manly man, the man's man. And Buck was he was the criminal, gruff, manly guy. Like he was trying to make it, he was going to change that island to the way he wanted it to be. And the two of them just clashed. And I think that ultimately that's what led to everything. Mm. And I think Eleanor wanted to get off the island. I'm sure Stephanie just wanted to get off the island.
She was described as more sociable than Buck. Like she was a hippie, but they could deal with that. Mm-hmm. They couldn't stand Buck.
Yeah. I'm sure she just wanted to get off the island, but she wouldn't leave Buck. And we know Eleanor really just wanted to get off the island. She wanted to leave. She wanted to be moving on. But I think that ultimately it was Mac and then machismo that said, "I'm not leaving this island. Like this is mine. Mm-hmm. I've made the decision to stay here, and they're not going to force me off." Mm-hmm. And I think that was where his downfall was the idea of, I'm not going to be forced by this guy off this island. Even though his intention wasn't to stay there forever. He's like, we're going to get to 6 months because I wanted to be here 6 months. We've only been here like 3. I'm not going to be forced off by this hippie guy.
When you were talking about that, Mike, made me think about trust as well. Now, I don't know that Mac really trusted Stephanie or Buck, but they had to have shown some kind of level of maybe trust isn't the right word, but being courteous to them at the very least, like, come onto our boat or like be around us or stuff like that with people that you don't know and people that everybody else is saying like, hey, stay away from them, so definitely that machismo, but maybe there was also an element of trust there. Like, we're going to trust people that we can invite them on the boat or we can be around them. We can talk to them, things like that. And on a deserted island, nobody else around. So I'm sure you want to socialize maybe, or maybe you want to just be around other people to some extent. But maybe there's just an element of trust there, too much trust, that maybe played a role in some of this as well. And I think another part of it too is Mac, obviously not listening to people, but also it makes sense to listen. Well, it makes sense to listen to your wife for one thing, especially when we should go home, we should not be here, those kind of things. And maybe that's just a lesson in general is if that many people are telling you this is not a good idea, okay, definitely think about that. if your wife is saying this is not a good idea, definitely think about that. But not even, is this a good idea or not? My wife really wants something, and it's different from what I want. Maybe we can kind of compromise here somewhere. Maybe we go somewhere different. Maybe we don't go back to the States. Maybe we don't do the settle down thing we plan to do. But maybe we do something different, and he really seems like he really set himself up for failure with that, not listening to anyone, not the least of which the most important person in his life, that really could have had a different outcome with this. We might never have known about this situation if he had compromised a little bit or recognized maybe I should actually listen to my wife, in this moment. But, I'd be curious to see what the relationship was like, if we could ever know details like that, which we probably wouldn't, but be curious to know what that was like for them. They were obviously around each other a lot. They were on the ship for, years at a time and so forth. So they spent a lot of time around each other, but I was just curious how that actually looked in real life.
Probably a resignation. Like Eleanor's probably resigned to this is the way he is.
This is just the way he is.
Yeah.
I think there are two alternate universes, with things that could have happened had Mac actually been like, okay, we're out of here, and left. In one universe, which is the more likely universe, Roy, Buck, and Stephanie would have just died on the island. Either he'd have killed her and then just died from starvation or exposure or something, or they both would have died from exposure. Because they were not suited for surviving on the island. If nobody else showed up for a while, they were screwed.
Right.
The other alternative is that somebody happened to show up and they got murdered because Buck wasn't going to stay on the island forever. The next boat that showed up, if Buck was still alive, they would have been killed. He would have been desperate enough at that point. Those are the two short courses if Mac and Eleanor had left.
I've got a third one. The marijuana seed eating bugs ate Buck and Stephanie. I think that's a very likely third.
I mean, they would have the munchies.
Exactly. Right. In my mind, that's the real likely.
That's most likely
scenario, right?
Yeah. No, but basically, either the two of them die or they killed somebody else to get their boat to get off the island.
Right.
And I think that might have played into what happened because Mac and Eleanor didn't leave, and Buck was just like, I'm done. Can't be here anymore. And this dude is laughing in my face with all his hoity-toity stuff.
His chessboard.
I get him. His chessboard.
Money.
His chessboard, his money, his diamonds all over everything.
Success in life.
Yeah. It also occurs to me at the time, if you think about the 70s.
His not having to chop down coconut trees. Chainsaw. It's the best way to do it, damn it.
His chainsaw-free method of coconut acquisition. Also occurs to me that, Malcolm, even though he was San Diego, lived in San Diego, he lived on the boat, but considered his home San Diego. And there were a lot of hippies.
Right.
Maybe not so much there, maybe a little more north, but there were, there was a hippie population. And, at the time, a lot of people thought, well, they're really taking over.
Right.
And imagine, this guy, kind of straight-laced, a tough guy. You could almost like military mindset, not going to be a big fan of hippies. And it gets to this island, you got to be kidding me.
You got to be kidding me.
I came all the way here to get away from the hippies.
Came out here to get away from the hippies. They're here, everywhere.
Yeah. So that could be part of it too. I'm not going to give up.
That's a great point.
Atoll.
Yeah.
Not giving up to these hippies. Yeah.
Not going to surrender to the hippies. All right. So we had one question. I think you said.
Well, I added some more on there.
Okay.
I found some other ones. So, all right. So, have you ever experienced somebody successfully using intuition or anything like it in a session? And up to your own interpretation, because I don't know exactly what that means, but I can't think of anything that would, in my own experience, that would constitute or count as intuition in a session.
I think of intuition as a perception, an interpretation of multiple variables that you perceive, but often in a crisis or a real dramatic interaction. Like you're walking somewhere and someone comes up to you and says something, like at a hotel or someplace you're unfamiliar with, and you have this intuition that they're not, they're like a psychopath or whatever. It can occur at other times, but that's how we often use it. Right. Like it's like a bad feeling. It's rarely like, oh, I'm going to buy this stock and it's going to go through the roof. I have intuition. It's often negative.
Right.
Survival instinct. I don't know if it's something that really happens in session, but you can see people kind of talk about when they had it and discuss like, what was it? I like to ask like, what was it about that person that made you realize they were dangerous? Because often the story is like, I thought they were dangerous and then they were to somebody else because I left.
Coincidences like that. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And they'll talk about like, the way they dressed, the way they made eye contact, crude speech, like all these things. And you put together and like, well, they're just metrics that you've calculated, and it's not magic, it's logic.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. I agree. It's kind of like an internal reason that, that you haven't been consciously mulling it over. You're not like, well, this means this and this means this. I mean, it's just a whole bunch of clues that have come together, and your brain does what it does. It seeks patterns and it puts things together. And then you're just kind of like, why doesn't this make sense? And then after the fact, it's like, oh, that's why that didn't make sense. But like I've had clients who especially couples, who were just like, I just had this intuition that he was cheating on me.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that intuition is based on the fact that you know his patterns. You know how he interacts. When you're living with people, you get to learn all of their patterns and how they're interacting, and when
they're a little bit off.
Right, and when those patterns go off, it becomes noticeable, and your brain picks it up and goes, "That's not right." And that kind of "that's not right" thing can, for some people, especially in those, for those very emotionally charged things, can become really, really impactful for them. Some people get really charged if their like coffee mug is 2 centimeters off to one side. They immediately notice that and go, "That's not right." And that's kind of the same thing. Like they notice the patterns, they know where things are supposed to be, and it's just off. And it builds that response. And I haven't ever seen anybody actually demonstrate that kind of reasoning in session. Often it's talked about after the fact.
It's a post-mortem, yeah. And all things being equal, if you're more distrusting, like if you're lower in agreeableness, you're going to have more intuition, right? Because you're more sensitive to that particular set of metrics being, a more mild deviation is going to trigger. Like, oh, there's something wrong with them. Turns out there's not, but you're very perceptive of small details. Just like somebody who's like has hypochondriasis is going to be really sensitive to physical sensations,
right?
And catastrophize to terminal cancer and all this. When somebody who's not, is not going to do that.
It's something they're proud of too. Like, I have this ability to really pick up on patterns, and I'm better at picking up patterns than other people. Well, yeah, maybe because you really don't trust a lot of people. Well, now you're proud of that, and now you're going to trust less people, fewer people, so that you can really focus on that ability to pick up those patterns, and it becomes maladaptive very quickly, or probably already was, but the cycle of that continues.
I explain it to clients like a car alarm. If you have a car alarm that goes off when somebody comes within 8 feet, you could say it's a very sensitive alarm. It's always alerting you, but is that helpful? If it's so sensitive that it's producing false alarms?
Yeah.
A lot of people see intuition as kind of the supernatural thing. And it's like, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I knew in that moment that this thing was going to happen, or that this person was dangerous, or that this person was doing something, blah, blah, blah. It's really just internal reasoning. That I've never seen anyone in real life or on TV who said they have the supernatural ability to intuit these things, who actually has had something other than a reasonable explanation.
It feels like it's magic or special, but I think you mentioned it's because it happens quickly, right? They're not sitting there like, "Oh, carry the 2," and like they're not doing all the math. They're just it's something that comes at one moment.
It's funny,
and you have to react.
Bob never has a second cup of coffee at home.
That intuition, yeah.
What else we got, Jeff?
So this is a two-parter. So I have it down as two separate questions, but so this will be the last one. Could you explore why high-profile deaths matter more to us, and what makes a case high-profile or famous, and who decides that?
As for the second part, I would say it's a combination of in terms of who decides, like the media, I think largely. If you take any case,
Right.
And you promote it the way they promoted Gabby Petito,
Right.
and you can make it famous.
Yeah, it's kind of like a train. Like every case, unless it starts with somebody who already famous, every case has the potential to get up there, but it starts out slowly. And if it catches people's interest and they start following it, then the media goes, "Oh, there's more people following this. We should follow up on this a little bit more and take a little closer look at it." So they then promote it more, which draws more interest in, which then starts to escalate things. And it's a train moving faster and faster and faster, like what happened with Gabby Petito, very, very rapidly.
Probably reduced to clicks these days, right? These big like Fox News, MSN, Newsweek, Insider, they probably track all number of times you click, and and they probably like scale it in terms of like how much they promoted already to like balance and figure out what's really popular and what's not, and then send their reporters to investigate when something's catching on.
An algorithm.
Yeah, they just some simple algorithms that do tracking of do tracking of things. There's arguments going on upstairs apparently, but the algorithms will track what's popular, what's trending. Well, we all can see what's trending, and so the news outlets will start reporting on something, and then if that thing starts trending, they kick up their coverage of it, and then which means it just trends more because there's more out there, and then it just becomes a cyclical increase. I think that's what makes these things high profile, other than a already high profile individual being involved.
Yeah. What was the first part of the question?
Could you explore why high-profile deaths matter more to us?
Okay, so famous people dying, so specifically death. Yeah, probably just because everything that happens to celebrities is of interest. It's a matter of public interest, and it gets reported. And I think with celebrities, people relate to them. And so when they die, it's like personal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's gossip. It's entertainment. Mm-hmm. Like that's been going on for the entirety of human history. I mean, the old poem "No Man Is an Island." Mm-hmm. That's all about that. How we as people shouldn't be gossiping about the person who died. We should realize that they were part of our community and mourn them just as we would a family member. Or
what is it? Ask not to know for whom the bell tolls.
For it tolls for thee.
It tolls for thee. Yeah.
Because that's the thing. Like that was the thing back when the poem was written, was the church bells tolled for death for every death. So if somebody died and the bell was ringing in the middle of the day, the entire town was like, "Who died? What's going on?" And they would gossip about it. So the whole poem is all about like, don't gossip about people who just died. Just mourn them like they're part of the community, because people have always been gossipy. We talk about people. We talk because it's entertainment. It is entertaining, especially when we don't know someone personally. But we can see a little bit of ourselves in them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, they're high profile because they're entertaining.
Yeah, and death is the great equalizer, right? Like, so you have people that are like elite and wealthy, and their death will come just the same as it will for everybody else. So it's, I think, also not satisfying, but it brings order back to the natural world. Yeah.
I was also thinking about things are more high profile when it's something that's important to us. So it can really show what's important to us as people, us as a nation, us as communities, cultures, things like that. So a crime or a death or something that might be might matter more to a certain community, of course, might be popular in that community, but the community next to it might not really care because it may not have something of interest to that community, maybe something to do with a cultural thing or a certain crime, something like that. That was played out with, and we talked about this before too, with Gabby Petito in particular, so here's a white woman that something happened to her, and it became international news very quickly. And then, of course, people made the case. Why doesn't that happen with maybe a person of color or something, somebody of a different culture, something like that? And that raises the question, is it important to us when people who are white, something happens to them, but not somebody of color, not somebody of a different culture and nationality? And it's an important question because maybe that's true. And I think suffice to say that it probably is true. And so that it's an opportunity for us as people everywhere to take a look at those biases and understand what really is important to us, and so it makes sense too that when a kid goes missing, that's something that makes more often than not makes news, popular news quickly, because it's important that we protect kids. That's an important thing for most everybody in the world. But if there's somebody who is perhaps a little bit older, maybe that doesn't make as much news because it's not a kid. It's not someone who's maybe as vulnerable.
Yeah. Older and poor.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
You take it like a homeless man and he goes missing, no one's going to care.
Right.
It could be the most mysterious case ever. It wouldn't matter.
We see that a lot too with sex workers in these different cases. That they're missing for a while.
Well, you
Nobody
remember
says anything.
Gary Ridgway, one of his victims was missing like a year and a half before she was even reported missing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh. So money, status, age,
attractiveness is a big thing.
Attractiveness, nationality,
if somebody's
race.
attractive, right? That's gonna draw more interest for missing persons or murder. Yeah. Not all of it necessarily speaks to bias. I think it's just some of it's just human nature to be interested in that which, like, is attractive. Mm-hmm.
Things that catch our eye,
right? Yeah,
are interesting.
Yeah,
and that's when something's interesting, we get interested.
Yeah, if something's novel too. It's like you see a bunch of cars going by and it's like a classic. You pay more attention. But back, let's say it was like in the 50s, a car from the 50s. If you were back in the 50s, it wouldn't stand out. Mm-hmm. It'd be another car, like a 57 Chevy. It was a popular, Bel Air. Everybody likes that.
Yeah.
It stands out now, but it doesn't mean you hate other cars. It just means that's different.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if we had a homeless guy who was beaten to death by 57 clowns with ketchup bottles, that would get people's attention because it's novel.
Because the perpetrator,
the perpetrators would be interesting. It's like, wait, 57 clowns with it? Like, is this the Heinz gang? Like what's going on there? Like, that would draw interest because it's novel. It's out there.
I'm still waiting for the first space murder. It doesn't matter who the victim is.
It's going to happen eventually.
That'll be popular.
Again, we predicted it before. There's going to be a space murder at some point.
I mean, at this point,
we'll cover it right here.
I'm looking at Steve Carell to figure that one out. Being in that Space Force TV show.
Space Force.
Right.
It's coming back for a second season.
It is.
Yeah. Yes, so I'm expecting him to figure it out the second it happens.
So I was thinking with the dogs barking, isn't there something, I forget which show it is, but like Oscars, Emmys, Academy Awards, something, where they play, like, the actors get up there and they just can't stop talking. Mm-hmm. So they do. And they play some type of music and like kind of...
They play them off, yeah.
I think that's like the dogs. Like,
they get like
time to wrap it up.
Yeah, they get like 30 seconds or something to make a speech or maybe a minute. And then but as soon as they hit that mark, they're just like, bring the music up. Mm-hmm. Get them off stage. Keep them moving.
Pan the camera away.
Yeah.
I always thought, not that I'm up for any type of award like that, but if somehow that happened, I always thought there's more dignity to make it short and memorable and not have any...
Thanks. Walk away.
So that's what I was thinking with the dogs. They know it's time to wrap up.
They're trying to tell us, shut up down there.
Sending a message.
So we'll wrap up there. I always like nautical cases, transportation cases in general.
Mm-hmm. They are interesting.
Yeah, but there's something about nautical because they're out. You're out in the ocean.
Yeah.
Usually there's a lot of money involved.
Mm-hmm.
It's neat. Except for the murder part, it would be very enjoyable.
Yeah. If it was like
if it weren't for the murder.
If it was like the everyone had a pleasant time and made it back safely part, that would be a completely different show.
It would. Yeah. I happen to like the murder part, but not like the part of stories where murder occurs.
Right. Yeah.
But the murder part's kind of a good show. I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah. The murder part's good. But if we were to go, like, if we become yachtmen, we wouldn't want the murder part there.
Right.
Yeah.
That would not be good.
That would be the peaceful journey part.
Yeah.
Right.
We would want the peaceful journey part. Yes. Just before we go, I want to point out our new tchotchke, our new mini
yeah.
over
Hold
here.
that up and,
This is our in honor of Rust. This is our cowboy hat. I think that was the thing that was voted for. So I 3D printed that. And for this episode, I'm thinking like a chess piece or a piece of coral reef.
What about the? Oh, you already have a boat. For
Yeah, we already have a
That's
catch.
a catch.
It's
Yeah,
a catch. Yeah. The Bluebell was a catch. It was a very similar boat. So I don't want to print another boat because it'd just be. And since the sea wind was blue, I would be painting another blue boat.
You could do
You can do a chainsaw.
You could do the Iola and just have the water and then a little bit of the mast.
That would be perfect. Or a big hole right in the middle.
Chainsaw's a good one. Like you do a chess piece or a chainsaw.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Buck won the sea wind in the chess game, so do the chess piece
And I trust
or the
that,
chainsaw. 'Cause
I trust that you would make the chainsaw somehow look as ridiculous as I picture it in my mind. Because there had to be something about it. Because Buck had it and he used it, and there had to be something about it that was.
I'll just paint
wrong.
it rusty.
Right. Yeah, right. It had to be rusty or the homemade chain or something like that. There's
Made of barbed wire.
There had to have been something about it that was just off, because that just lines up with him.
Yeah,
You probably didn't get the oil gasoline mixture right.
probably didn't. Yeah. So we'll do that chess piece or the chainsaw.
Very good. So we'll wrap up today's episode of The Murder Part. Thanks so much for watching. Please put any comments in the comment section. We always read them, and we respond to many. And we'll be back pretty soon with another episode of The Murder Part and Alien Lizard Humanoids. Again, thank you so much.